She had the kind of perfect, untouchable life that everyone envied, complete with the perfect college boyfriend. So explain to me why she just dragged me into an empty room, kissed me like the world was ending, and then completely disappeared. Welcome back to the channel, lovers of drama and romance. If you are obsessed with GL stories that will literally play with your heartstrings, make you scream at your screen, and keep you constantly guessing, you are in the right place. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and drop a comment down below to let me know you're here. This is just the beginning of an epic 10-part journey, and trust me, the tea is piping hot. Let's dive right in. Part 1: The Golden Girl's Secret. I never intended to be part of a cliché, let alone the messy, complicated secret half of one. My name is Harper. I am a 20-year-old photography major who prefers to exist exclusively behind a camera lens. Safer there. You get to observe the world without actually having to participate in its madness. You get to capture other people's moments while keeping your own life completely hidden in the shadows. And for 2 years of college, that strategy worked perfectly. I had my small, tight-knit circle, I had my darkroom, and I had my peace. And then there was Chloe. Chloe was not peace. Chloe was a walking, talking hurricane wrapped in designer clothes and a flawless smile. She was the captain of the varsity swim team, the president of her sorority, and arguably the most popular girl on the entire campus. Everywhere she went, people parted like the Red Sea just to let her through. She was radiant, confident, and completely untouchable. Oh, and she also had a boyfriend. Brody. The star quarterback, the golden boy of the university. They were the campus royalty, the couple everyone wanted to be. Their pictures were plastered all over the university's social media pages. Brody with his arm wrapped tightly around Chloe's waist, Chloe smiling perfectly for the camera. They were the picture of a perfect heterosexual dream. So you can understand why I am currently losing my actual mind. Because less than 24 hours ago, that same girl, the girl with the quarterback boyfriend and the perfect life, cornered me at a chaotic fraternity party, locked the door behind us, and kissed me until I couldn't remember my own name. Let me rewind, because if I don't, I am going to spontaneously combust. It was a Friday night, and the only reason I was even at the Alpha Sigma party was because my best friend, Liam, threatened to throw my vintage cameras out the window if I didn't socialize. Liam is dramatic, loud, unapologetic, and fiercely loyal. He had dragged me out of my dorm, shoved a red plastic cup into my hand, and ordered me to mingle. Our other best friend, Stella, had just rolled her eyes at him, leaning against the wall with her usual stoic, unbothered energy. Stella is the rational one, the anchor to Liam's chaotic kite. I had been doing my best to survive the night. I was standing near the hallway, taking candid photos of the neon lights and the blurred faces, trying to blend into the wallpaper. The bass from the speakers was vibrating through my chest, the air was thick with the smell of cheap perfume and questionable decisions, and I was counting down the minutes until I could escape back to my quiet room. That was when I saw her through the lens of my camera. Chloe. She was standing across the room, surrounded by her usual crowd of admirers. Brody was right beside her, talking animatedly to one of his teammates. But Chloe wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me. Now, I need to make something very clear. This wasn't the first time I had caught Chloe staring. For the past month, we had shared this strange, unspoken orbit. In the campus coffee shop, in the library, walking across the quad, every time I looked up, her eyes were already on me. It was this intense, heavy gaze that made my stomach flip, but I had always convinced myself I was imagining things. I mean, why would Chloe, the queen of the school, be looking at Harper, the invisible photographer? But that night at the party, there was no mistaking it. Her eyes locked onto mine through the crowded room, and the air between us suddenly felt electric. I lowered my camera slowly. She didn't look away. Instead, she whispered something to Brody, slipped out of his grip, and started walking toward the dimly lit hallway where I was standing. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I panicked. I didn't know what to do, so I turned and practically ran down the corridor, trying to find a quiet place to catch my breath. I ducked into an empty guest bedroom, shutting the door behind me. The sudden silence was a relief, but it only lasted for 3 seconds before the door clicked open again. And there she was. Chloe closed the door, turning the lock with a soft, final click. The room was dark, illuminated only by the faint streetlights spilling through the window. She stepped closer and my breath hitched. She smelled like expensive vanilla and something entirely intoxicating. "Harper," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper, but it sounded deafening in the quiet room. "You shouldn't be in here," I managed to say, my voice trembling embarrassingly. "Brody is out there." "I don't care about Brody right now," she replied, stepping into my personal space. The distance between us evaporated. I could feel the heat radiating from her body. She looked up at me, her eyes dark and searching, completely stripped of that perfect practice smile she gave everyone else. This was a raw, vulnerable Chloe that no one on this campus had ever seen. "What are you doing?" I asked, my back hitting the edge of a desk. "Something I've wanted to do for a very long time," she murmured. And then she reached up, her hands tangling into my hair, and she pulled me down. Kiss was explosive. It wasn't hesitant or experimental. It was desperate, intentional, and consuming. The moment her lips met mine, every single rational thought in my brain short-circuited. I dropped my camera, the strap catching on my arm, and my hands instinctively found her waist, pulling her closer. She tasted like cherry lip gloss and something sweet. She gasped softly against my mouth, her fingers tightening in my hair, anchoring me to her. Felt like the entire world was spinning out of control, and she was the only solid thing left. We kissed like we were starving, like we had been waiting for this exact moment for months. And then, just as quickly as it started, she pulled away. She was breathless, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with sudden panic. The reality of what she had just done seemed to crash down on her all at once. "Chloe," I whispered, still entirely dazed. She didn't say a word. She looked terrified. She backed away from me, fumbled with the lock on the door, and bolted out of the room, leaving me standing there in the dark, my lips still tingling, my heart racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Which brings us to right now. The morning after. I have not slept a single wink. I am sitting on the floor of my dorm room, staring blankly at the wall. My mind is replaying that kiss on an endless, agonizing loop. I can still feel her hands in my hair. I can still feel the way she leaned into me. The door to my room flies open, and Liam storms in, holding 2 massive cups of iced coffee. "Rise and shine, trauma victim," Liam announces, kicking the door shut behind him. He takes one look at my face and stops dead in his tracks. "Okay, you look like you just saw a ghost. Or worse, your ex. What happened?" Stella follows closely behind him, clutching her own mug of tea. She takes a seat on my bed, her sharp eyes instantly analyzing me. "She didn't sleep," Stella says calmly, taking a sip of her tea. "Look at her posture. She's in crisis mode." "I am not in crisis mode," I croak out, my voice raspy. "Harper, you are sitting on the floor hugging a pillow and you haven't blinked in 30 seconds. Bill. "Right now," Liam demands, handing me a coffee. I take a desperate sip of the caffeine, trying to find the words. How do I even say it out loud? If I say it, it becomes real. If it becomes real, I have to deal with the fact that the most popular girl on campus, who is very much taken by a man, kissed me. I kissed someone last night," I finally whisper. Liam gasps dramatically, clutching an invisible pearl necklace. "Oh my God. We have progress." "Who? Was it that cute indie girl from your art history class?" "I told you she was giving you the eyes." "No," I say, my stomach tying itself in knots. Stella narrows her eyes. She knows me too well. "Harper, who did you kiss?" I squeeze my eyes shut. "Chloe." The silence in the room is so thick you could cut it with a knife. I open one eye to see Liam standing completely frozen, his mouth wide open. Stella has slowly lowered her tea mug to her lap, her expression completely unreadable. "Chloe," Liam screeches, his voice jumping 3 octaves. "As in, Chloe the cheerleader? Chloe the swim captain? Chloe, who is currently dating Brody the human mountain." "She kissed me," I correct him defensively. "She dragged me into a room and kissed me." "Are you absolutely sure you weren't hallucinating from the fumes in that frat house?" Liam asks, pacing the room now. "Because this is not a drill, Harper. This is high-level treason against the campus social order." "I'm sure," I say quietly. "It was real. It felt like she meant it." Stella finally speaks, her voice dangerously calm. "And what happened after?" "She ran," I admit, the sting of rejection finally hitting me. "She panicked and just ran away. I haven't heard from her since. I don't even have her number." Liam stops pacing and looks at me with a mixture of pity and terror. "Harper, you are playing with fire. The girl has a whole boyfriend. A very large boyfriend. I didn't ask for this." I groan, burying my face in my hands. "I just want to pretend it never happened. I'm just going to avoid her. It's a massive campus. I can totally avoid her." I tell myself that lie all morning. I tell myself that the kiss was a mistake, a drunken lapse in judgment on her part. I tell myself that I am going to walk into my 11 a.m. photography seminar, keep my head down, and move on with my life. But the universe has a terrible sense of humor. 'Cause when I walk into the campus courtyard, flanked by Liam and Stella, the very first person I see is her. Chloe is sitting on the edge of the fountain, surrounded by her friends. Brody is standing behind her, his arms draped loosely over her shoulders. She is laughing at something he said, looking completely, utterly perfect. She looks like a girl who did not lock a photographer in a dark room last night. She looks like a girl who doesn't even know my name. My chest tithes. It hurts. Physically hurts to look at her acting so normal while my entire world has been tilted off its axis. "Keep walking," Stella murmurs, nudging my arm. "Don't look." I try. I really do. But as we pass by the courtyard, some invisible magnetic force pulls my gaze back to her. And at that exact second, Chloe looks up. Our eyes meet across the crowded courtyard. The laughter dies on her lips. She freezes, the entire bustling campus seemingly fading away into background noise. It's just her and me, locked in a stare that feels heavy with all the things we aren't saying. Her breath hitches, I can see the subtle rise of her chest. For a second, I think she might say something. I think she might push Brody's arm away. Instead, she quickly looks down at her lap, breaking the connection, completely ignoring my existence. She goes back to smiling. Back to pretending. A sharp ache blooms in my chest, worse than before. She really is going to pretend it meant nothing. I swallow hard, forcing my legs to keep moving. "I'm fine," I whisper to Liam and Stella, even though my voice cracks. "I'm totally fine." But as I walk away, my phone buzzes violently in my pocket. I pull it out, staring at the screen in absolute shock. It's a text message from an unknown number. The "Meet me in the library archives at midnight. Please don't hate me. See. End of part 1. Part 2. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone until the words started to blur together. The "Meet me in the library archives at midnight. Please don't hate me. See. 5 minutes passed. 10. I didn't move. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, the sounds of the campus settling into the evening echoing outside my window, but all I could hear was the frantic, uneven beating of my own heart. The audacity of this girl. First, she kisses me like I am the only source of oxygen left in the room. Then, she runs away. Then, she looks right through me in the middle of the courtyard while her giant quarterback boyfriend has his arm draped over her. And now? Now she wants me to sneak into the dusty, off-limits basement of the campus library in the middle of the night. "Absolutely not," a voice declared from the doorway. I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. Liam was leaning against the doorframe, holding a bag of sour gummies and looking at me with an expression of intense disapproval. Stella slipped into the room right behind him, quietly taking her usual spot on the floor by my radiator. "I didn't even say anything," I protested, quickly locking my phone screen and tossing it onto the mattress. "You didn't have to," Liam scoffed, walking over and tossing a gummy worm at my head. Bounced off my forehead. "You have your I am about to make a terrible, emotionally devastating decision face on. Did she text you?" The queen of mixed signals. I let out a long, heavy sigh, knowing there was zero point in lying to them. I picked up the phone, unlocked it, and handed it to Liam. Stella leaned over his shoulder to read it. Liam gasped, clutching his chest. "The library archives? Are we in a spy movie? Harper, this is a trap. She's going to lure you down there, tell you it was a mistake, and leave you crying among the encyclopedias. Do not go." "Liam is right," Stella said softly, her voice cutting through his theatrics. "She's playing a game, Harper. She has a reputation to maintain, and right now she's trying to figure out if you're a threat to it. If she wanted to be honest, she wouldn't be hiding in a basement. But what if she actually wants to explain?" I argued, hating how desperate my own voice sounded. "What if she's just scared?" "She has Brody," Liam reminded me, crossing his arms. "She has the sorority, the status, the perfect life. You are a photography major who gets nervous ordering at the drive-thru. You cannot play in her league, Harper. She will crush you." They were right. Objectively, logically, factually, they were 100% right. I knew what I was dealing with. Chloe was the sun, and if you got too close, you got burned. I nodded slowly, taking my phone back from Liam. "You're right. I'm not going. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to sleep, and tomorrow I will officially erase Chloe from my brain." Liam beamed, clapping his hands together. "Excellent choice. Proud of you, bestie. Now, let's watch bad reality TV until our brains melt." We spent the next 3 hours watching reality shows, but I couldn't focus on a single word being said on the screen. The digital clock on my nightstand seemed to mock me. 10:30 p.m. 11 p.m. 11:45 p.m. By the time Liam and Stella finally went back to their own dorms, the campus was quiet. I turned off my lamp and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. "Please don't hate me." Those 4 words kept echoing in my head. Why would she care if I hated her? If I meant nothing, if the kiss was just a drunken mistake, why would she risk texting me? Why would she care? At 11:52 p.m., my logic officially lost the battle against my curiosity. I threw off the covers, pulled on a dark hoodie, and shoved my feet into my sneakers. I didn't even look in the mirror. I practically ran out of my dorm building, stepping into the crisp, biting night air. Campus was completely deserted, bathed in the eerie orange glow of the streetlights. The library was a massive, Gothic-style stone building at the center of the quad. The main floors were locked at 10 p.m., but every student knew about the broken service door around the back. My hands were shaking as I pulled the heavy metal door open and slipped inside. The library was pitch black, smelling of old paper, floor wax, and silence. I turned on my phone's flashlight, aiming it at the floor as I crept down the concrete stairwell toward the archives. The archives were a maze of towering, rolling metal bookshelves that housed decades of old university records, forgotten literature, and donated collections. It was cold down here, so cold I could see my breath. I stepped off the last stair, sweeping my flashlight across the dark room. "Turn that off," a voice whispered sharply from the shadows. I flinched, immediately hitting the power button on my phone. The darkness swallowed the room instantly, but as my eyes adjusted to the faint moonlight filtering through the high basement windows, I saw her. Chloe was sitting on top of an old wooden table pushed against the far wall. She wasn't wearing her usual pristine designer clothes. Instead, she was wearing a massive, oversized gray sweatshirt with the hood pulled up over her head, her knees pulled tight to her chest. She looked small. For the first time since I'd known who she was, Chloe looked incredibly, painfully human. I walked closer, my anger slowly melting into a confusing mix of anxiety and relief. I stopped a few feet away from the table, crossing my arms defensively over my chest. "I shouldn't have come," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Chloe let out a shaky breath, letting her legs drop from the table as she slid to her feet. She took a tentative step toward me. "But you did. Why did you ask me to?" I demanded, the sting of the morning courtyard rushing back to me. "To make sure I wouldn't tell anyone about the party? Don't worry, your secret is safe. I have no intention of ruining your perfect, shiny life." Chloe winced like I had actually hit her. She reached up, pulling the hood back from her head. In the dim light, I could see that her eyes were red-rimmed. She had been crying. The golden girl of the campus had been crying in a dusty basement. "Do you think I wanted to ignore you today?" Her voice cracked, raw and desperate. "Do you have any idea how hard it was to look at you, to see you hurting, and force myself to look away?" "Then why did you do it?" I challenged, refusing to back down. "Brody had his arm around you, Chloe. You looked right through me like I was garbage." "Because I was terrified," she fired back, stepping closer, closing the distance between us until I could smell that familiar, intoxicating scent of vanilla. Brody was right there. His friends were right there. If I had looked at you for 1 second too long, if my expression changed even a fraction, they would have noticed. They notice everything, Harper. My entire life is lived under a microscope. My parents, the sorority, Brody, everyone has this idea of exactly who I am supposed to be. "And who are you?" I asked softly, the anger finally bleeding out of my voice. Chloe looked down at the floor, a single tear escaping and tracking down her cheek. "I don't know," she whispered, sounding so broken it made my chest ache. "I've been playing this role for so long that I don't know where the performance ends and I begin. But then I saw you." She looked back up at me, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made the breath catch in my throat. "I've been watching you all semester, Harper," she confessed, the truth pouring out of her in an unstoppable rush. "In the cafe while you're editing photos. In the library. You are so unapologetically yourself. You hide behind that camera, but you see everything. And when I'm around you, even just in the same room, it feels like I can finally breathe. That kiss, it wasn't a mistake. It was the first real, honest thing I've done in years." My heart was pounding so hard I was certain she could hear it echoing in the quiet basement. She was so close now. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin. The space between us was charged, crackling with a terrifying, undeniable electricity. I wanted to close the gap. I wanted to pull her in and kiss her until the rest of the world disappeared completely. "Chloe," I started, my voice trembling. I reached out, my fingers just barely brushing against the fabric of her sleeve. Suddenly, a heavy, metallic clang echoed through the basement. We both froze. "Hello," a gruff voice called out from the top of the stairwell. A beam of harsh yellow light sliced through the darkness, sweeping across the rows of bookshelves. "Security. Is someone down there?" Panic surged through me. If we were caught down here, especially together, it would be a disaster. If Chloe was seen sneaking around in the dark with me, her carefully constructed life would implode before morning. "Move," Chloe hissed, grabbing my wrist. She pulled me violently into the nearest aisle between 2 towering metal shelves. The space was incredibly narrow, designed only to squeeze past to grab a file. I hit the cold metal of the back shelf, and Chloe pressed flush against me, pinning me in the dark. The security guard's heavy boots clunked down the concrete stairs. Thud. 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 My breath hitched. I couldn't move. Chloe was pressed entirely against the front of my body. Her hands were flat against the metal shelf on either side of my head, trapping me. Her face was inches from mine. In the suffocating darkness, my senses exploded. I could feel the rapid rise and fall of her chest against mine. I could feel the warmth of her breath ghosting over my lips. The flashlight beam swept past our aisle, casting a brief, blinding streak of light over Chloe's face. Her eyes were blown wide, fixed completely on my lips. She swallowed hard, her gaze flickering up to my eyes. "Anyone here?" the guard muttered, his footsteps echoing as he walked past our aisle just a few feet away. Neither of us dared to breathe. But in the dark, hidden from the world, Chloe slowly lowered one of her hands from the shelf. Her fingers found mine in the space between our bodies. She didn't just hold my hand. She laced her fingers securely through mine, gripping me tight like I was an anchor keeping her from floating away. Contrast of the terrifying situation outside our aisle and the intense electric intimacy happening within it was enough to drive me insane. We stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity, holding hands in the dark, until the guard finally sighed, muttered something into his radio and walked back up the stairs. The heavy metal door clicked shut above us. We were safe. But neither of us let go. "Harper," Chloe whispered, her voice husky, her face still impossibly close to mine. "I can't be a secret, Chloe," I whispered back, my voice shaking, trying to maintain some shred of self-preservation. "I won't be your dirty little secret while you play house with Brody in the daylight. I deserve better than that." Chloe closed her eyes, resting her forehead gently against mine. "I know," she breathed. "Just please, give me a little time. Please." She finally pulled away, the loss of her body heat making me shiver instantly. She slipped out of the aisle, disappearing into the shadows before I could even process what had just happened. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I was a walking zombie. Liam and Stella took one look at the dark circles under my eyes in our art history lecture and wisely chose not to ask any questions. I assumed things would go back to normal. I assumed Chloe would go back to ignoring me. But as the lecture ended and students began filtering out of the massive auditorium, I was struggling to pack my camera into my bag. I was the last one in my row. "Excuse me," a deep voice said. I looked up. It was Brody. He was wearing his varsity jacket, holding 2 coffees, standing at the edge of my row. My blood ran completely cold. But Brody wasn't looking at me. He was looking over his shoulder at the row behind us. Chloe walked down the steps, entirely pristine, the golden girl once again. She smiled flawlessly at Brody, taking one of the coffees from his hand. "Thanks, babe," she said sweetly. But as she turned to walk up the aisle, she passed right behind my chair. Brody had already turned his back, walking toward the exit. In that split second, out of Brody's line of sight, Chloe let her hand drop. Her fingers brushed intentionally, firmly, against the back of my neck as she walked past. A jolt of electricity shot straight down my spine. I snapped my head up, staring at her retreating back. She didn't look over her shoulder. She just linked her arm through Brody's and walked out the door. I sat there, completely frozen in the empty auditorium, my skin still burning where she had touched me. This was not a game anymore. This was a war. And I had absolutely no idea how I was going to survive it. End of part 2. Part 3. I spent the next 48 hours feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. That fleeting touch in the auditorium, the deliberate phantom brush of Chloe's fingers against the back of my neck, felt like a brand burned directly into my skin. It was a secret language, a quiet rebellion hidden in plain sight, and it was completely tearing me apart. I couldn't focus in my classes. I couldn't sleep. Every time my phone vibrated, my heart leaped into my throat, half expecting another midnight summons, half terrified it would be nothing at all. By Wednesday evening, I had retreated to the only place on campus where I felt completely in control, the photography darkroom in the basement of the arts building. The darkroom was my sanctuary. Smelled heavily of developer chemicals and stop baths, illuminated only by the haunting, blood-red glow of the safe light. I was hanging wet prints on the drying line, trying to lose myself in the mechanical, repetitive process of bringing images to life. But even the photos were betraying me. I had been trying to develop a landscape series for my portfolio, but somehow my mind kept drifting to the contrast of the shadows in the library archives, the exact slope of Chloe's shoulders, the terrified vulnerability in her eyes when the security guard had walked past. The heavy metal door of the darkroom groaned open, spilling a harsh wedge of hallway light into my sanctuary. "Close the door," I hissed, blindly shielding the undeveloped paper on my workstation. "You're going to ruin the exposure." Sorry. Liam's voice echoed as he quickly shoved the door shut, plunging us back into the red glow. He set a greasy pizza box on the edge of the counter. Stella materialized behind him, leaning against the doorframe like a shadow. "You've been in here for 6 hours, Harper," Stella said smoothly, crossing her arms. "You missed dinner. You missed your sociology study group. And judging by the fact that you are currently developing a picture of a blurry tree for the 4th time, you are not actually doing homework." I sighed, dropping my tongs into the chemical tray and wiping my hands on my apron. "I'm fine. I just needed to focus." "You are spiraling," Liam corrected, grabbing a slice of pepperoni pizza. "And you only spiral when you are avoiding something. Or someone. Did she do something else? Did the swim team siren strike again?" I wanted to lie. I really did. I wanted to tell them that I had moved on, that I had listened to their advice, and that I was firmly erasing Chloe from my narrative. But the truth was a heavy, suffocating weight in my chest, and I couldn't carry it alone anymore. "She touched me," I whispered, the words echoing in the quiet room. Liam stopped mid-chew. Stella uncrossed her arms, stepping fully into the red light. "Explain," she demanded, her voice losing its usual detached coolness. I told them about the lecture hall. I told them about how Brody had been standing right there, completely oblivious, while Chloe deliberately traced her fingers against my skin behind his back. As I spoke, I felt my face burning with a mixture of shame and lingering adrenaline. "Harper," Stella said quietly, her tone shifting to something dangerous and protective. "She is playing with you. She wants the thrill of the secret without giving up the safety of the crown. It's intoxicating for her. She gets to go back to her perfect, shiny life with her perfect, shiny boyfriend, and she keeps you on a string in the dark." "It didn't feel like a game in the library," I argued weakly, though the doubt was already gnawing at my insides. "She was terrified, Stella. She's trapped." "Being trapped is a reason, Harper, not an excuse," Stella replied sharply. "If she's not willing to walk in the daylight with you, she doesn't deserve you in the dark. You are going to get destroyed." I hated that she was right. I hated that every logical, rational part of my brain agreed with her. I nodded slowly, staring down at the chemical trays. "I know. You're right. I can't do this. I need to avoid her. For real this time." "Good," Liam said, patting my shoulder with a greasy hand. "Because you are a catch, Harper. You do not belong in a closet, and you definitely don't belong in the shadows of someone else's relationship." My resolution to avoid Chloe was rock solid. It was a fortress. I was entirely committed to my new era of emotional self-preservation. Until Thursday morning, when my journalism professor handed me an envelope that completely shattered my fortress into a million pieces. "The annual Greek Life Charity Gala is this Saturday," Professor Evans announced, leaning against his desk. "The campus magazine needs full photographic coverage. Candid shots, the speeches, the atmosphere. Harper, you've been producing incredible work lately. I want you as the lead photographer for the event." My stomach instantly hit the floor. The Greek Life Charity Gala. It was the biggest, most prestigious event of the year, and it was hosted by the Alpha Sigma fraternity and the Delta Pi sorority. Brody and Chloe's organizations. They were the co-chairs of the entire event. They were the king and queen of the night. Avoiding Chloe on a campus of 10,000 students was hard. Avoiding her when I was literally assigned to follow her around with a camera lens for 4 hours was mathematically impossible. "Professor," I stammered, my palms suddenly sweating. I really don't think I'm the best fit for this. I specialize in landscape and still life. Event photography isn't really my. It will stretch your abilities, Harper, he interrupted with a warm, dismissive smile. It's excellent for your portfolio. Consider it a mandatory assignment. There was no getting out of it. Saturday night arrived like an executioner. Campus ballroom had been transformed into a glittering, opulent wonderland of crystal chandeliers, draped silk, and ice sculptures. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and catered food. Everyone who was anyone on campus was there, dressed in sharp tuxedos and sweeping evening gowns. I was wearing a simple dark green velvet suit, gripping my camera so tightly my knuckles were white. My job was to be invisible, to document the magic without participating in it. I spent the first hour hiding near the floral arrangements, snapping photos of wealthy alumni shaking hands and students clinking champagne glasses. I was doing a brilliant job of avoiding the center of the room. Then the doors to the grand staircase opened, and the entire ballroom seemed to collectively hold its breath. Chloe walked in. She was wearing a floor-length, backless black silk dress that clung to her perfectly. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elegant, messy bun, and she looked like she had stepped directly out of a high-fashion editorial. Brody was right beside her, looking obnoxiously handsome in a tailored tuxedo, his hand resting securely on the small of her bare back. My chest tightened painfully. I lifted my camera, hiding behind the lens, and watched them descend the stairs. Through the viewfinder, they looked like the perfect American dream. Brody leaned over, whispering something in her ear. Chloe smiled, throwing her head back in a flawless, practiced laugh. Click. I captured the moment. The photo would look beautiful in the magazine. But because I was looking through the lens, I saw what no one else in the room saw. The moment the flash went off, Chloe's laughter faded. Her eyes scanned the crowd, cutting through the sea of people, until they locked directly onto the giant lens of my camera. Even from 50 feet away, the impact of her stare physically staggered me. She didn't look away. Brody was talking to her, gesturing to the crowd, but Chloe was perfectly still, her eyes anchored to me. Felt like she was stripping me bare right there in the middle of the ballroom. I lowered the camera slowly, my breathing shallow. For a terrifying, electrifying second, the crowded room disappeared. There was no gala. There was no Brody. There was just the desperate, heavy gravity pulling us together. Then, Brody tugged her arm, leading her toward a group of alumni, and the spell was broken. I couldn't take it. The air in the ballroom suddenly felt too hot, too thin, too suffocating. I needed to leave. I turned on my heel, pushing through the crowd of glittering dresses and tailored suits, making a beeline for the heavy glass doors that led out to the back terrace. The night air hit me like a bucket of ice water. Terrace was empty, bathed in the soft glow of fairy lights strung through the trees. I leaned against the stone balustrade, closing my eyes and taking deep, shaking breaths, trying to quiet the aggressive hammering of my heart. Della is right, I told myself fiercely. She's playing a part. She belongs in there. You belong out here. The soft click of a door opening made me jump. I turned around, my heart stopping entirely. Chloe was standing on the terrace, the heavy glass door clicking shut behind her, cutting off the muffled sounds of the jazz band inside. The chilly night wind caught the loose strands of her hair. She looked at me, her chest rising and falling quickly like she had run to find me. "You shouldn't be out here," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound cold. "The king and queen are expected to hold court." Chloe ignored the sarcasm. She walked slowly across the stone patio, her heels clicking softly, stopping only when she was a few feet away from me. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of her face, highlighting the exhaustion hiding just beneath her perfect makeup. "I couldn't breathe in there," she whispered, wrapping her arms around her own waist, suddenly looking incredibly fragile. "Everyone wants something from me. Everyone is looking at me, but nobody actually sees me. Nobody except you." Don't do this, Chloe, I warned, taking a half step back, my back pressing against the cold stone of the balustrade. Don't come out here and say things like that and then go back inside and let him hold you. I can't survive it. You think this is easy for me? She asked, her voice cracking, stepping closer until she was invading my personal space. You think I want to be in there with him? Then leave him. I snapped, the frustration finally boiling over. If this is all a lie, Chloe, then stop lying. Walk away. I can't, she fired back, tears suddenly welling in her eyes. You don't understand, Harper. My father, he controls everything. My tuition, my housing, my future. Brody's dad is his biggest investor. This entire relationship, this gala, my sorority, it's all a business arrangement to him. If I ruin this, if I step out of line, he will cut me off entirely. He will take everything away from me. The anger drained out of me, replaced by a cold, sickening realization. She wasn't just performing for popularity. She was performing for survival. The perfect, untouchable Chloe was a hostage in her own life. She took another step forward, the space between us vanishing completely. I could feel the silk of her dress brushing against my velvet suit. She looked up at me, a single tear slipping down her cheek, completely destroying her flawless facade. I'm terrified, Harper, she whispered, her voice breaking. I am so terrified of losing everything. But every time I look at you, I feel like I'm already losing my mind. She reached up, her trembling fingers gently cupping my jaw. Her thumb brushed softly across my cheekbone. The touch was so tender, so desperately sad, it made my breath hitch. I looked down at her lips, the magnetic pull between us overriding every single logical thought in my brain. I leaned in, my eyelids fluttering shut, the warmth of her breath mixing with mine in the cold night air. We were millimeters apart. I could feel the ghost of her lips against mine. Chloe, a loud, confused voice echoed from the terrace doors. We sprang apart instantly, stumbling back as if we had been electrocuted. I whipped my head toward the doors. Brody was standing there, his brow furrowed, a half-empty champagne flute in his hand. He looked from me, standing in my velvet suit clutching my camera, to Chloe, who was quickly wiping her cheek and fixing her posture. What are you doing out here? Brody asked, his voice thick with suspicion, his eyes narrowing as he looked at me. And who is this? End of part 3. Part 4. Brody's voice sliced through the heavy, fragile tension of the terrace like a physical blade. I stumbled back so fast my shoulder blade slammed hard against the cold stone of the balustrade. My heart was hammering a frantic, violent rhythm against my ribs, and my throat went completely dry. For a split second, I thought it was over. I thought Brody had seen the way we were leaning in, the way the space between us had evaporated, the way Chloe's hand had been resting so intimately against my jaw. I braced myself for the explosion. But when I looked at Chloe, the vulnerable, terrified girl from a second ago was gone. In her place was the flawless, impenetrable queen of Alpha Sigma. It was like watching a ghost possess a mannequin. She turned around slowly, smoothing down the front of her black silk dress, and let out a perfectly measured, tinkling laugh. Brody, honestly, you startled me, she said, her voice light, airy, and dripping with an affection that made my stomach aggressively turn. She glided across the terrace toward him, slipping her arms seamlessly through his. So hot in that ballroom. I just came out here to catch my breath. Brody wrapped his heavy arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting over her shoulder to glare at me. You didn't answer my question. Who is this? Oh, this is Harper, Chloe said dismissively, not even turning around to look at me. The casual, careless way she said my name felt like a physical slap to the face. She's the photographer the university assigned to the magazine. She was just asking if she could get a few solo shots of me out here in the moonlight. You know how these art majors are, always looking for the perfect lighting. She said the words art majors with a slight patronizing chuckle. I stood there, completely frozen, gripping my camera so tightly my fingers were aching. I couldn't breathe. The whiplash of her sudden change in demeanor was physically nauseating. Less than a minute ago, she had been crying, telling me I was the only person who actually saw her. Now she was reducing me to the help to appease her quarterback boyfriend. Brody scoffed, looking me up and down with undisguised contempt. He didn't see me as a threat. He saw me as an inconvenience. Solo shots? We're the co-chairs of this gala, Chloe. If she wants pictures for the magazine, she takes them of us together. Not you hiding out in the dark. You're completely right, babe, Chloe agreed softly, resting her head against his shoulder. Tell you what, let's go back inside and find my dad. Harper can get a shot of us by the ice sculpture. Does that sound good? Yeah. Fine, Brody muttered. He looked at me one last time, his gaze cold and dismissive. We're done out here. Do your job inside. He turned around, leading Chloe back toward the heavy glass doors. As Brody reached for the handle, Chloe hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, she turned her head, looking back at me over her bare shoulder. Her mask slipped. Her eyes were wide, desperate, pleading with me silently. I'm sorry. Please understand. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an answering look. I simply raised my camera, hiding my face behind the lens, and turned away. I didn't stay to take pictures of them by the ice sculpture. I walked straight out the side gate of the terrace, marched across the freezing campus in my velvet suit, and locked myself in my dorm room. Sunday was a blur of misery and chemical fumes. I spent 12 straight hours in the campus darkroom, hiding from the world. My editor at the magazine needed the digital files by Monday morning, and I had to process them. As I sat in front of the glowing monitor, clicking through the hundreds of photos I had taken at the gala, I felt hollowed out. There were dozens of pictures of Brody and Chloe. They looked like a magazine spread for a luxury wedding brand. They looked happy. They looked perfect. But then I reached the photo I had taken when Chloe first walked down the grand staircase. I enlarged it on my screen, my breath hitching in the quiet room. In the photo, the entire ballroom was out of focus. Brody was out of focus. The only thing that was razor-sharp, crystal clear, was Chloe. She was looking directly into the lens. The expression on her face wasn't the fake, practiced smile she gave everyone else. It was an intense, heavy, entirely naked look of longing. She was looking at the camera the exact way she had looked at me in the library basement. You can't submit that one. I jumped, spinning around in my chair. Stella was standing in the doorway, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. She walked over, setting one down next to my keyboard, her dark eyes fixed on the monitor. Why not? I asked defensively, quickly minimizing the window. It's a great shot. The composition is perfect. Harper, look at me, Stella said, her voice dropping to that calm, authoritative tone she used when I was being deliberately stubborn. Look at her eyes in that picture. If you submit that to the campus magazine, every single person who looks at it is going to ask why the girlfriend of the star quarterback is looking at the photographer like she wants to devour her. But you will out her. And more importantly, you will drag yourself directly into the center of a hurricane. I slouched down in my chair, dragging my hands down my face. I hate her, Stella. I really, really hate her. No, you don't, Stella said softly, pulling up a stool and sitting next to me. You hate the situation. You hate that she's a coward. But you don't hate her. Did you hear what she called me? I whispered, the sting of the Terrace coming back full force. She treated me like I was a stranger. Like I was nothing. She's in a cage, Harper, Stella reminded me, her tone gentle but firm. A cage made of money, expectations, and a very large, aggressive boyfriend. And until she figures out how to open the door herself, you cannot keep reaching your hand through the bars. She is going to get you bitten. Stella was right. She was always right. I deleted the staircase photo from the submission folder, packed up my gear, and swore to myself that I was officially completely done. I managed to hold on to that resolution for exactly 48 hours. Tuesday afternoon, the campus was buzzing with the sudden drop in temperature. Everyone was bundled in heavy coats, rushing between buildings to escape the biting wind. I was walking out of the student union, clutching a hot vanilla latte, completely lost in my own thoughts when a massive shadow blocked my path. I stopped short, nearly spilling my coffee. It was Brody. He was standing on the concrete path, wearing his team hoodie, his arms crossed over his massive chest. He didn't have his usual entourage of frat brothers with him. He was alone, and he looked furious. "Harper, right?" he asked, though it didn't sound like a question. "Yes," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. I took a step to the side, trying to walk around him. "Excuse me, I have a class." He stepped sideways, blocking me again. Courtyard around us was relatively empty, and a cold spike of genuine adrenaline shot through my veins. "I saw the proof gallery you sent to the magazine editor," Brody said, his voice low and threatening. "My buddy works on the editorial board." He showed them to me before they went to print. My grip on my coffee cup tightened. "Okay. And?" "They're standard event photos." Brody leaned in closer, towering over me. Close, without Chloe acting as a buffer, he was incredibly intimidating. "Why aren't there any photos of Chloe and me together? You took hundreds of pictures. But the only ones you submitted of her were group shots where she's standing 5 feet away from me. What's your problem?" I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I had deliberately excluded the intimate photos of them because looking at them made me physically ill. I didn't think anyone would actually notice. "I submitted the photos with the best lighting and composition," I lied, keeping my chin up, refusing to shrink back. "It's an artistic choice. If you have an issue with the magazine's content, take it up with the editor." Brody's jaw flexed. He looked me up and down, his eyes narrowing as he seemed to piece something together. "You think you're pretty clever, don't you? Let me make something very clear to you, art major. Chloe has been acting completely out of her mind since the party last week. She won't talk to me, she's skipping her sorority meetings, and now I find out she was sneaking around on a terrace with you." "We weren't sneaking around," I said sharply. "I was taking a break." "I don't care what you were doing," Brody sneered, stepping so close I had to crane my neck to look at him. "Stay the hell away from my girlfriend. If I catch you pulling her into dark corners again, I'm going to make sure the dean revokes your little photography scholarship. Do we understand each other?" He didn't wait for an answer. He deliberately bumped his shoulder hard against mine as he walked past, nearly knocking me off balance, and stormed off toward the athletic complex. I stood frozen on the pathway, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. My hands were shaking violently. Brody didn't just suspect something was off. He was actively threatening me. Stella's warning echoed loudly in my head. "You will drag yourself directly into the center of a hurricane." I didn't go to class. I couldn't. I turned around and basically ran back to the arts building, seeking the only place where I felt safe. I unlocked the heavy metal door to the darkroom, stepped inside, and slammed it shut, locking the deadbolt behind me. I leaned against the door, closing my eyes and trying to force air into my panicked lungs. I needed to breathe. I needed to calm down. "Harper!" My eyes snapped open. The darkroom was illuminated only by the faint red glow of the safe light, but I could see her silhouette perfectly. Chloe was sitting on the edge of the chemical counter. She was wearing a heavy trench coat, her blonde hair messy, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, pushing myself off the door, my anger immediately flaring up to mask my fear. "This room requires a keycard." "I waited until a freshman left and caught the door," she said softly, sliding off the counter. She took a step toward me, but I instantly took a step back, holding my hands up. "Stop. Do not come any closer," I warned, my voice shaking. "I just got backed into a corner by your boyfriend in the middle of the courtyard. He threatened my scholarship, Chloe." He knows something is wrong and he's coming after me. Chloe's face fell, sheer panic washing over her features. Brody talked to you? Did he hurt you? Harper, I swear. I don't care what you swear, I shouted, the dam finally breaking. The red light made the tears welling in my eyes feel hot. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep running to me in the dark when you're sad, and then throwing me to the wolves in the daylight. I am a person, Chloe. I am not your escape hatch. I know, she cried out, her voice echoing loudly off the concrete walls. She didn't retreat. Instead, she closed the distance between us, grabbing my wrists. I tried to pull away, but she held on tight, her hands trembling violently. I know I'm a coward, she sobbed, the tears spilling freely down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. I know I have treated you terribly. And I know you have every right to hate me. Then why are you here? I whispered, my voice breaking. Chloe looked up at me, her eyes completely shattered, stripped of every single defense she had ever built. Because I broke up with him, she said, the words hanging in the red-lit room like a detonated bomb. I stopped breathing. The entire world seemed to screech to a violent halt. What? I ended it, Chloe whispered, her grip on my wrists loosening as she slid her hands down to interlock her fingers with mine. This morning, I told him I couldn't do it anymore. I told him it was over. I stared at her, unable to process the magnitude of what she was saying. The golden couple was dead. Chloe had just detonated her entire social standing. Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. Chloe stepped into my space, so close our chests were touching. She looked up at me, her gaze completely, terrifyingly certain. Because I would rather lose everything, she whispered, than spend one more day pretending I don't want you. End of part 4. Part 5. I stopped breathing. The faint hum of the ventilation fan in the darkroom seemed to amplify, echoing loudly in the suffocating silence that followed her words. The red safe light cast deep, dramatic shadows across Chloe's face, highlighting the absolute terrifying certainty in her eyes. You did what? I whispered, the words barely managing to escape my throat. I broke up with him, Chloe repeated, her voice steadier this time, though her hands were still trembling where they held mine. I told him it was over. I told him I couldn't pretend anymore. My mind spun violently, struggling to catch up to the reality of what she had just done. The golden couple, the university's absolute royalty, was dead. Chloe had just detonated her entire social standing, her safety net, and potentially her relationship with her controlling father, all before noon on a Tuesday. Chloe, are you out of your mind? I breathed out, stepping closer, the sheer magnitude of her sacrifice crashing down on me. Brody just cornered me in the quad. He was furious. He threatened to have my photography scholarship revoked. If he finds out the reason you dumped him is because of me. He won't, Chloe interrupted fiercely, her grip tightening on my fingers. He doesn't know about us, Harper. He thinks I'm just going through a phase of rebellion. He blames you because you were on the terrace with me, because you're different from everyone in his circle, and his ego can't handle the fact that I walked away on my own. But he doesn't know. He's not an idiot, I argued, my heart hammering against my ribs. He's going to put the pieces together. And your dad. Chloe, you said your dad would cut you off. Let him, Chloe said. Conviction in her voice was so raw, so unyielding, it actually made me shiver. She took another step forward, erasing the final sliver of space between us. I am so tired, Harper. I am so unbelievably exhausted from constantly shrinking myself to fit into their perfect little boxes. I have spent my entire life being the daughter my father wanted, the girlfriend Brody wanted, the president my sorority wanted. But none of it was real. She reached up, her hands leaving mine to gently cup my face. Her thumbs brushed softly over my cheekbones, wiping away a stray tear I hadn't even realized had fallen. When I am with you, she whispered, her gaze dropping to my lips before rising back to meet my eyes, I don't have to perform. You see the real me. And the real me wants you. I want you, Harper. Only you. All of my defenses, all of the walls I had painstakingly built over the last week, completely and utterly shattered. I didn't think anymore. I just leaned in and closed the gap. The moment my lips met hers, a desperate electric shockwave ripped through my entire body. This kiss wasn't like the rushed, panic-fueled collision at the fraternity party. It wasn't hidden in the terrifying shadows of the library basement. This was intentional. This was a promise. Chloe let out a soft, breathless gasp, her arms wrapping tightly around my neck, pulling me flush against her. I wrapped my arms around her waist, anchoring her to me, kissing her with every ounce of pent-up frustration, fear, and longing that had been tearing me apart. She tasted like vanilla and tears, and she kissed me back with a fierce, demanding hunger, as if I were the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. We stood there in the blood-red glow of the darkroom, entirely lost in each other, the rest of the campus and all of its toxic drama fading into absolute nothingness. For a few minutes, there were no sororities, no quarterbacks, no threats, and no expectations. There was just us. When we finally, reluctantly pulled apart, we were both breathless. Chloe rested her forehead against mine, her eyes closed, a genuine, beautiful smile slowly spreading across her face. "Okay," I whispered, my voice incredibly shaky. "Okay. What do we do now?" Chloe opened her eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "No, we survived the fallout. Together." By Wednesday morning, the campus was a literal war zone of gossip. The news of the breakup had spread through the university's anonymous forums and group chats like a wildfire. It was all anyone could talk about. I was sitting at a corner table in the campus cafe with Liam and Stella, hiding behind my laptop screen as I watched the chaos unfold. "It's trending," Liam announced, staring at his phone with wide, horrified eyes. "They have a literal hashtag, Harper. Hashtag bro is over. People are crying in the comments. The Delta Pi sorority house is reportedly in mourning. They've lowered their flag to half-mast. Okay, I made that last part up, but still. It's bad. It's exactly what we expected," Stella said calmly, sipping her black coffee. She looked over the rim of her cup, fixing her sharp gaze on me. "The real question is, how is the king handling his dethroning?" I swallowed hard, tracing the rim of my latte cup. I hadn't told them about Brody cornering me in the courtyard. I knew Liam would panic, and Stella would likely march out and key Brody's car, which would only make things worse. "He's angry," I said carefully. "But Chloe said he doesn't know about me." "Not in that way. He just thinks she's rebelling." "For now," Stella corrected, her eyes narrowing. "But Brody's ego is severely bruised. A guy like that doesn't just quietly accept being dumped. He looks for a scapegoat. And Harper, you are the weird, artsy girl who was caught hanging out with his perfect girlfriend in the dark. You are the perfect scapegoat. So what do I do?" I asked, my anxiety spiking again. "Hide in my dorm until graduation?" "You don't hide," a voice said. My head snapped up. Chloe was standing right there, holding a steaming cup of oat milk coffee. She was wearing a simple oversized sweater and vintage jeans, a stark contrast to her usual polished designer sorority outfits. She looked completely out of her element, but somehow she had never looked more beautiful. The moment she stopped at our table, the ambient noise in the cafe dropped by 50%. I could practically feel the collective gaze of 40 students locking onto us. Whispers erupted immediately. Liam choked on his muffin. Stella slowly lowered her coffee cup, her posture instantly stiffening into a defensive guard. "Can I sit with you?" Chloe asked, looking directly at me, her voice steady but her knuckles white where she gripped her cup. This was it. This was the test. She wasn't dragging me into an empty room. She wasn't brushing my neck in the shadows of a lecture hall. She was standing in the middle of the crowded student cafe in broad daylight, asking to join my world. My heart did a violent flip. I slid my laptop over, clearing a space. Yeah, I breathed out. Sit. Chloe sat down in the empty chair right beside me. Not across from me, but right next to me, our shoulders practically brushing. Liam stared at her like she was a mythological creature that had just dropped from the ceiling. You're sitting here. The loser table. In public. Chloe offered Liam a small, self-deprecating smile. I don't think this is the loser table. I think it's the only table with people who actually tell the truth. Stella didn't smile. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, her dark eyes locking onto Chloe like a predator assessing a threat. You blew up your life yesterday, Chloe. That's very brave. But if you're sitting here right now just to prove a point to Brody or to test the waters of a rebellious phase, you need to get up and leave. Because I will not let you use Harper as collateral damage in your identity crisis. Stella. I hissed, my face burning. No, she's right, Chloe said quietly, holding Stella's intense gaze without flinching. I have a lot of collateral damage in my life right now. And I know I have a terrible track record. But I am not using her. I'm here because I want to be here. And I am entirely done hiding. Stella studied her for a long, agonizing moment. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, giving a single short nod. Okay. But you're buying the next round of coffees. A wave of profound relief washed over me. I looked at Chloe, and under the table, hidden from the prying eyes of the cafe, she slipped her hand into mine. I squeezed her fingers, feeling a brief, terrifying spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could actually make this work. Well. The hope shattered instantly. I looked up. Standing on the other side of our table was Vanessa. Vanessa was the vice president of the Delta Pi sorority, Chloe's supposed best friend, and arguably the most terrifying girl on campus next to Chloe herself. She was flanked by two other sorority sisters, all of them glaring down at us with identical expressions of thinly veiled disgust. We've been looking everywhere for you, Chloe, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She didn't even look at me, she stared at Chloe like she had lost her mind. You missed the emergency executive board meeting this morning. And your dad called the house line looking for you. Why are you sitting over here with the photography club? She said the word photography like it was a contagious disease. Chloe's grip on my hand tightened painfully under the table, but her face remained a mask of perfect calm. She looked up at Vanessa. I'm having coffee, Vanessa. With my friends. Vanessa's perfectly arched eyebrows shot up to her hairline. Your friends? Chloe, you are having a public meltdown. Brody is a wreck, your father is threatening to pull the sorority's alumni funding, and you are sitting here wearing a sweater that looks like it came from a thrift store. Get up. We are going back to the house to fix this. It was a command, not a request. The entire cafe was dead silent now. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting to see if the dethroned queen would heel to her second-in-command. I held my breath. I wanted to defend her, but I knew this was a battle Chloe had to fight herself. If she gave in now, it was over. Chloe slowly, deliberately let go of my hand under the table. My stomach plummeted into my shoes. I thought she was going to get up. I thought she was going to surrender. Instead, Chloe picked up her oat milk coffee, took a slow, agonizingly calm sip, and set it back down. She looked Vanessa dead in the eye. I'm not going anywhere, Vanessa, Chloe said, her voice echoing clearly across the silent cafe. I'm exactly where I want to be. So you can go back to the house and you can tell my father, Brody, and the entire executive board that I quit. A collective gasp echoed from a nearby table. Liam actually whimpered. Vanessa's face turned an ugly shade of red. Her mask of fake sweetness completely evaporated, leaving behind pure, unadulterated venom. You're making a massive mistake, Chloe. You think these people can protect you? When your dad cuts your tuition and Brody ruins your reputation, you are going to have nothing. I'd rather have nothing than be owned by you people, Chloe fired back, her voice shaking with adrenaline. Now, please leave. We were having a nice conversation. Vanessa glared at me, her eyes burning with a terrifying hatred. This is your fault, she hissed. You are going to regret this, Harper. She spun on her heel and stormed out of the cafe, her two minions trailing quickly behind her. As soon as the doors swung shut, the cafe erupted into furious whispers. Chloe slumped back in her chair, letting out a breath that sounded like a sob. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and adrenaline. You quit? I whispered, absolutely stunned. I burned the bridge, Chloe corrected, forcing a fragile smile. There's no going back now. I reached across the table, not hiding it this time, and took her hand in plain sight. You were incredible. For the rest of the day, it felt like we were walking on air. The worst was over, or so I thought. Chloe had made her choice. She had chosen me publicly, fearlessly, and for the first time in weeks, I actually felt like I could breathe. But Stella's warning had been right. We had dragged ourselves into the center of a hurricane, and the storm was just getting started. 4 p.m., I was walking back to my dorm alone, riding the high of the afternoon. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Chloe. Instead, it was a high-priority email notification. Sender, Office of the Dean of Arts and Humanities. Subject, urgent academic review and scholarship status. My blood ran completely cold. I stopped walking, my hands shaking violently as I opened the email. Dear Harper, you are hereby summoned to an immediate disciplinary hearing tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. regarding multiple allegations of misconduct and a formal review of your university photography scholarship. Your standing at this institution has been suspended pending the results of this meeting. I stared at the screen, the words blurring together as sheer panic gripped my chest. Brody hadn't just made a threat. He had actually pulled the trigger. And he was trying to destroy my entire life. End of part 5. Part 6. I stood completely frozen on the concrete pathway, the biting wind whipping my hair across my face, but I couldn't feel the cold. All I could feel was the violent, chaotic hammering of my heart against my ribs. I read the email again. And again. The words blurred together, swimming on the bright screen of my phone until they lost all meaning. Disciplinary hearing. Misconduct. Scholarship suspended. My photography scholarship was not just an award. It was my entire lifeline. I wasn't like Chloe, whose family name was carved into the marble of the university library. I wasn't like Brody, whose father practically funded the athletic department. I was the daughter of a high school teacher and a mechanic. I had spent 4 years in high school working 2 part-time jobs just to afford my first professional camera, staying up until 3 in the morning perfecting my portfolio just to get into this university. Without that scholarship, my time here was over. I would be packing my bags and taking a bus back to my hometown by Friday. Brody knew exactly where to strike to completely destroy me. Harper. Earth to Harper. I snapped my head up. Liam was jogging toward me across the courtyard, a heavy scarf wrapped around his neck, holding 2 bags of takeout. He stopped when he saw my face, his cheerful demeanor vanishing instantly. What happened? He demanded, dropping the bags onto a nearby bench. You look like you're about to pass out. I couldn't speak. I just handed him my phone. Liam's eyes scanned the screen and his jaw practically unhinged. No. No, no, no. Can't do this. He is a college quarterback, not a mob boss. He's a college quarterback whose father is on the board of trustees. Stella's voice rang out as she approached us from the opposite direction. She took the phone from Liam's shaking hands, her dark eyes narrowing as she read the email. A cold, dangerous fury settled over her features. This is a targeted hit. Brody is weaponizing the administration against you. What am I supposed to do, Stella? I whispered, my voice finally breaking. Tears I had been fighting back began to spill over. I can't afford tuition. If they take my scholarship, I'm done. My entire life is ruined because I took a few photos and fell for the wrong girl. Don't say that, Stella commanded fiercely, gripping my shoulders. You did not ruin your life. Brody is throwing a tantrum because he lost his prized possession and he thinks you're an easy target because you don't have a trust fund to hide behind. But he underestimated us. We have to tell Chloe, Liam insisted, pulling out his own phone. She needs to know what her psychotic ex is doing. No, I shouted, lunging forward and snatching his phone out of his hand. No, Liam. We cannot tell her. Stella frowned deeply. Harper, she is the reason this is happening. She has a right to know. If we tell her, what do you think she's going to do? I pleaded, looking desperately between my two best friends. She just blew up her entire life this morning. She sacrificed her sorority, her safety net, and her relationship with her father just to be free. If she finds out Brody is doing this to me, she will go straight back to him to make it stop. She'll trade her freedom for my scholarship. I will not let her do that. Liam looked heartbroken, but he slowly lowered his hands. Stella stared at me for a long, agonizing moment, her jaw clenched tight. You're protecting her, Stella said quietly. She protected me today in the cafe, I replied, wiping my eyes. Now it's my turn. I'm going to that hearing tomorrow morning, and I am going to fight for myself. But Chloe cannot know until it's over. That night was the longest night of my entire life. I didn't sleep a single minute. I sat on the floor of my dorm room, surrounded by my printed portfolios, my acceptance letters, and every piece of proof I had that I belonged at this school. I was trying to build an armor out of paper, but it felt terrifyingly fragile. At 7:45 a.m. the next morning, I walked into the administration building. It was a massive, imposing structure made of dark wood and marble, designed specifically to make you feel small. Liam and Stella flanked me like bodyguards, walking me right up to the heavy oak doors of the Dean of Students' office. We'll be right out here, Liam said, giving my hand a tight squeeze. If you need us, you scream, and I will personally break the door down. Breathe, Harper, Stella instructed, adjusting the collar of my blazer. Stick to the facts. Do not let them intimidate you. I nodded, took a deep, shuddering breath, and pushed the door open. Dean Harrison's office smelled like expensive leather and stale coffee. He was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, his hands steepled in front of him. But he wasn't alone. Sitting in one of the leather guest chairs, looking entirely too comfortable, was Brody. My blood boiled instantly. Dean Harrison, I said, forcing my voice to remain level as I closed the door behind me. I was informed this was a disciplinary review. I wasn't aware a student would be sitting in. Mr. Vance is here as a representative of the Alpha Sigma fraternity, Miss Evans, Dean Harrison said smoothly, gesturing to the empty chair next to Brody. Please sit. I refused to sit next to him. I remained standing, gripping the strap of my messenger bag so hard my fingers went numb. I'll stand. What exactly are the charges against me? Dean Harrison sighed, opening a thick manila folder on his desk. We have received multiple formal complaints regarding your conduct over the past 2 weeks. Specifically, unauthorized access to restricted university areas, harassment of the student body, and gross violation of privacy during your role as a university-appointed photographer. That is a complete lie, I fired back, my heart pounding in my ears. I have never harassed anyone. I take photos for the art department and the campus magazine. Everything I do is sanctioned. Brody let out a low, mocking chuckle. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his broad chest. Really? 'Cause campus security filed a report stating they found you trespassing in the library archives after midnight last Friday. A restricted area. My breath hitched. The library basement. He had gotten the security guard's log. And, Brody continued, his eyes glittering with malicious triumph, several members of my fraternity and members of the Delta Pi sorority have filed formal complaints stating that you have been stalking them, taking photos without their consent and creating a hostile environment. They're lying, I snapped, looking desperately at the dean. Dean Harrison, this is a coordinated attack. Brody is angry because of a personal matter, and he is using his fraternity brothers to file fake complaints to get my scholarship revoked. Dean Harrison adjusted his glasses, looking remarkably uncomfortable. Miss Evans, the university takes these allegations very seriously. When multiple prominent student organizations file grievances, we have no choice but to act. Furthermore, the alumni board, meaning Brody's father, I interrupted, the injustice of it all making my voice shake. You're taking away my education because I don't have enough money to fight back. Watch your tone, Miss Evans, Dean Harrison warned sharply. As of right now, pending a full investigation, your scholarship is suspended. If the investigation finds these claims valid, you will be expelled. Expelled. The word echoed in the quiet room like a gunshot. My vision blurred. I felt like the floor was giving out from beneath me. Brody smirked, a cruel, satisfied smile that made me want to scream. He had won. He had completely destroyed me in less than 24 hours just to prove he could. I opened my mouth to speak, to beg, to say anything to save my future, but before I could make a sound, the heavy oak doors behind me violently flew open. The loud crash of wood hitting the wall made both the dean and Brody jump. I spun around. Chloe was standing in the doorway. She looked absolutely lethal. She was wearing a sharp, tailored black blazer over a white blouse, her hair pulled back into a severe, perfect ponytail. She didn't look like a terrified girl in a basement. She didn't look like a captive princess. She looked like a general walking onto a battlefield. And standing right behind her, arms crossed and looking incredibly smug, was Stella. Stella told her, I realized. She went behind my back and told her. Chloe, Brody said, standing up immediately, his smug expression faltering into genuine confusion. What are you doing here? Chloe ignored him completely. She walked straight past me, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor, and marched right up to the dean's desk. She didn't sit down. She slammed a thick black leather binder directly onto the center of his mahogany desk. Dean Harrison, Chloe said, her voice dripping with ice. I understand you're holding a disciplinary hearing regarding Harper Evans based on complaints from the Alpha Sigma fraternity. The dean looked completely bewildered. Miss Carter, you cannot interrupt a private disciplinary. I am the former president of the Delta Pi sorority, a current honor roll student, and the daughter of your largest private donor, Chloe interrupted, her voice raising just enough to command absolute, undeniable authority. I can interrupt whatever I want. Brody stepped forward, reaching for her arm. Chloe, stop. You're being dramatic. Let the dean do his job. Chloe turned her head, fixing Brody with a glare so venomous he actually took a step back. If you touch me, Brody, I promise you will regret it for the rest of your natural life. She turned back to the dean, tapping her perfectly manicured finger against the black binder. Harper Evans is not a stalker, nor is she harassing anyone, Chloe stated clearly. I invited her into the library archives that night. It was my idea. If you are going to expel her for trespassing, you will have to expel me as well. My heart stopped. She was confessing. She was tying her fate directly to mine. Chloe, have you lost your mind? Brody hissed, his face turning red. Why are you defending her? Because she is my girlfriend, Chloe said. The word dropped into the room like a nuclear bomb. The silence that followed was absolute. Dean Harrison's jaw practically hit his desk. Brody looked like he had been physically punched in the stomach. He stared at Chloe, then at me, the reality of the situation finally shattering his massive ego. You? Brody stammered, his voice laced with pure shock and disgust. You left me for a girl. I left you because you are a controlling, manipulative narcissist, Chloe corrected fiercely, not backing down an inch. And now I am going to end you. She flipped open the black binder. Dean Harrison, Chloe continued smoothly, her voice commanding the entire room. Inside this binder, you will find printed copies of emails, text messages, and bank transfers detailing the systemic academic fraud committed by the Alpha Sigma fraternity over the last 3 years, including receipts of Brody Vance paying a graduate student to write every single one of his midterm essays. Brody's face drained of all color. He looked like a ghost. You wouldn't. I was your girlfriend for 2 years, Brody, Chloe said, a deadly smile playing on her lips. I know where all the bodies are buried. I know about the hazing rituals you bribed campus security to ignore. I know about the slush fund you use for your parties. I have every single receipt, and I have just forwarded digital copies to the university's ethics board, the board of trustees, and the editor of the local city newspaper. Dean Harrison stood up, panic completely overtaking his professional demeanor. Miss Carter, please, this is a massive scandal. If this gets out, it will destroy the university's reputation. Then you better fix it, Chloe snapped, leaning over the desk. You are going to drop every single fabricated charge against Harper Evans right now. You are going to reinstate her scholarship with a full formal apology. And you are going to initiate an immediate investigation into Brody Vance and the Alpha Sigma fraternity. If you do not agree to these terms right this second, I will press send on the email to the press, and I will let the whole world watch this university burn. She held up her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. Power in the room had shifted so violently my head was spinning. Brody was paralyzed. The untouchable golden boy was suddenly backed into a corner he couldn't buy his way out of. Dean Harrison looked at the binder, looked at Brody, and then slumped back into his chair, utterly defeated. The charges against Miss Evans are dismissed, he muttered, rubbing his temples. The scholarship is reinstated. Glad we could reach an understanding, Chloe said brightly. She snapped the binder shut, tucked it under her arm, and finally turned to look at me. The icy, terrifying queen vanished, replaced by the warm, beautiful girl who had kissed me in the darkroom. She walked over to me, took my hand, and intertwined her fingers with mine. Let's go, Harper, she said softly. We walked out of the office together, leaving Brody and the dean in complete ruins. Liam and Stella were waiting in the hallway. Liam let out a loud, victorious cheer, and Stella actually smiled, a real, genuine smile. As we pushed through the heavy doors of the administration building and stepped out into the crisp morning air, the adrenaline finally began to fade, leaving me trembling. I stopped on the pathway, pulling Chloe to a halt. You didn't have to do that, I whispered, tears spilling over my lashes. You just declared war on your own world. Chloe stepped closer, wrapping her arms around my neck, pressing her forehead against mine just like she had in the darkroom. It wasn't my world, Harper. It was a prison. You're my world now. She kissed me right there in the open courtyard in the broad daylight for anyone to see. And as her lips moved perfectly against mine, I knew the war was far from over. Her father still had to find out. The fallout from the fraternity scandal was going to be massive. But as I held her tight, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. We were finally standing in the light, and we were standing together. End of Part 6. Part 7. The walk from the administration building to the center of campus took exactly 12 minutes, but it felt like we were moving in slow motion through an entirely different dimension. For 2 years, my survival strategy at this university had been complete invisibility. I walked with my head down, I hid behind the lens of my camera, and I stayed firmly out of the crosshairs of the campus elite. Now I was holding hands with the dethroned queen of Alpha Sigma, walking straight through the crowded quad in broad daylight, leaving a trail of absolute chaos in our wake. People didn't just stare, they stopped dead in their tracks. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Phones were whipped out, camera lenses zooming in on our intertwined fingers. The rumor mill had already churned out a dozen different versions of what had happened in the dean's office, but seeing us together, undeniable and unbothered, was the ultimate confirmation. "They're looking at us," I murmured, my grip on Chloe's hand instinctively tightening as we passed a group of wide-eyed freshmen. "Let them look," Chloe said, her voice steady and surprisingly calm. She didn't bow her head. She kept her chin high, her shoulders back, radiating that effortless confidence that had always intimidated me. But when she squeezed my hand in return, her thumb tracing small, reassuring circles against my knuckles, I realized the confidence wasn't a performance anymore. It was real. "I'm done hiding, Harper. Let them take all the pictures they want." By the time we reached my dorm, Liam was practically vibrating with excitement. He unlocked the door and ushered us inside, slamming it shut behind us like we were celebrities escaping the paparazzi. Stella was sitting on my bed, her laptop open, scrolling through the university's anonymous forums. "You did it," Liam gasped, clutching his chest and staring at Chloe like she was a superhero. "You actually did it. The Alpha Sigma fraternity is in full lockdown. Brody hasn't been seen since he left the administration building, and the dean's office just sent out a mass email about an upcoming audit of student organizations. You detonated the entire system." Chloe let out a long, exhausted breath, the adrenaline finally beginning to drain from her posture. She slipped off her sharp black blazer, suddenly looking incredibly tired. Brody pushed me into a corner. I just made sure he was the one who got crushed when the walls caved in. "I have to admit," Stella said, looking up from her screen. She closed the laptop with a decisive snap and looked at Chloe with a newfound, begrudging respect. "That was a masterpiece. You weaponized his own arrogance against him. I didn't think you had it in you." "Neither did I," Chloe admitted softly, walking over to the small, cramped window of my dorm and looking out over the campus. I stepped up behind her, wrapping my arms gently around her waist. She melted against me immediately, leaning her head back against my shoulder. Contrast of holding her in my tiny, cluttered dorm room, miles away from the grand ballrooms and luxury sorority houses she was used to, felt surreal, but it also felt entirely right. "You saved my life today," I whispered into her hair. "My scholarship, my future, all of it. Thank you." Chloe turned in my arms, resting her hands flat against my chest. Her blue eyes were soft, but there was a lingering shadow of worry behind them. "You saved me first, Harper. You showed me that there was a world outside of my father's cage. But—" Her voice trailed off. The silence in the room suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. "But what?" Liam asked, his celebratory mood evaporating. "But Brody was just the warm-up," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "Brody is a bully with a fragile ego. My father is a completely different kind of monster. And by now, Vanessa will have called him. He knows I quit the sorority. He knows the engagement with Brody is off. He knows about the scandal." Right on cue, as if summoned by the sheer terror in her voice, Chloe's phone began to vibrate violently on my desk. The screen lit up with a single name, Richard Carter. We all stared at the glowing rectangle like it was a live grenade. Chloe's breath hitched. She pulled away from me, staring at the phone, her hands trembling so badly she had to clench them into fists to stop the shaking. For a second, I thought she was going to let it ring. But the old conditioning, the years of living under his absolute control, was too strong. She reached out and answered it, putting it on speaker. "Hello," she said, her voice wavering just a fraction. "Chloe," her father's voice echoed through the small room. It wasn't a yell. It wasn't angry. It was cold, smooth, and chillingly precise. It was the voice of a man who was used to buying, selling, and destroying people before his morning coffee. "Dad, I can explain." "You will not explain anything over the phone," Richard Carter interrupted smoothly. "I am currently sitting in the penthouse suite of the Grand Hotel downtown. You have 20 minutes to get here." If you are not walking through that door by 11:30 a.m., I will freeze every single one of your bank accounts, cancel your credit cards, and notify the university that I am pulling your tuition funding effective immediately. Do we understand each other? Dad, please. Click. He hung up. Chloe dropped the phone onto the desk. She looked pale, the color completely draining from her face. The brief taste of freedom we had experienced in the courtyard was gone, replaced by the crushing, suffocating reality of her life. I have to go, she whispered, moving frantically to grab her blazer and her purse. I have to go right now. If I'm late, he'll actually do it. He'll take everything. Whoa, wait a minute, I said, catching her arm and pulling her gently to a stop. You're not going anywhere near that hotel alone. Chloe shook her head wildly, her eyes wide with panic. Harper, you don't understand him. He is ruthless. If you come with me, he will turn all of his anger onto you. He has a team of corporate lawyers on retainer. He can ruin your life in ways Brody couldn't even dream of. I am not letting you become collateral damage. I am already in the crosshairs, Chloe. I argued, refusing to let go of her arm. He's going to find out about me anyway. If we are doing this, if we are actually going to be together, then we face him together. I am not letting you walk into the lion's den by yourself. Chloe stared at me, a tear slipping down her cheek. She opened her mouth to argue, but Stella stepped forward, handing me my coat. Harper is right, Stella said firmly. You go as a united front. If he sees you cowering, he will exploit it. You walk in there and you show him that his money doesn't control you anymore. 25 minutes later, we were stepping off the gold-plated elevator into the penthouse suite of the Grand Hotel. The suite was absurdly large, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. Felt sterile, cold, and completely devoid of warmth. Sitting at the end of a long glass dining table was Richard Carter. He was dressed in an immaculate $1,000 charcoal suit, sipping a glass of sparkling water while tapping away on a sleek laptop. He didn't look up when we walked in. He deliberately made us wait in the silence, establishing dominance before a single word was spoken. Finally, he closed his laptop. His cold, calculating blue eyes, so similar to Chloe's yet entirely devoid of light, fixed on his daughter. Then, his gaze slid over to me, looking me up and down with an expression of profound, bored distaste. You're late, he said simply. And you brought a guest. How extraordinarily unprofessional. Dad, Chloe started, her voice trembling slightly. She cleared her throat, standing taller. This is Harper. She is my... I know exactly who she is, Richard interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. Harper Evans, photography major, daughter of a public school teacher, relying on a fragile university scholarship to subsidize an education she cannot afford. He looked at me directly. I ran a background check on you 30 minutes ago. You are unremarkable in every conceivable way. I felt my face burn with a mixture of humiliation and fury, but I refused to look away. I squeezed Chloe's hand. Let's skip the dramatic rebellion speech, Chloe, Richard continued, leaning back in his chair. I received a hysterical phone call from Vanessa this morning, followed by a very concerning update regarding the Alpha Sigma fraternity. You have made a mess. You have embarrassed our family name, and you have jeopardized a very lucrative merger I am currently negotiating with Brody's father. Is that all I am to you? Chloe asked, her voice cracking, the pain of a lifetime of rejection bleeding through. A bargaining chip for a corporate merger? You are an investment, he corrected coldly. An investment I have poured millions of dollars into. I bought you the best education, the best clothes, the best social standing, all so you could secure our family's position. And you are throwing it away for... He gestured vaguely toward me. A bohemian phase. It's not a phase, I spoke up, my voice remarkably steady despite the terror thrumming in my veins. I love her. And she deserves to be with someone who actually cares about her happiness, not just her market value. Richard Carter actually laughed. It was a short, dry, humorless sound. "Love," he mocked. How utterly predictable. He reached into his suit jacket, pulled out a sleek silver checkbook, and clicked a gold pen. "Let's test this, love, shall we? Miss Evans, I will write you a check right now for $50,000. Cash. Enough to pay off your meager student loans and buy all the camera equipment your little heart desires. All you have to do is walk out of that door, never speak to my daughter again, and disappear." My stomach turned violently. He was trying to buy me. He was treating this like a corporate buyout. Chloe gasped, stepping forward. "Dad, stop. Don't do this." "Quiet, Chloe," he snapped. He looked at me, holding the pen over the paper. 50,000. Tax-free. Take the money, Harper. Because if you don't, I promise you, I will make sure you never work as a photographer in this state. I will crush you. I looked at the checkbook. Then I looked at Chloe, who was watching me with absolute terror in her eyes, terrified that her father was right, that everyone had a price. I took a slow, deep breath, stepped up to the glass table, and looked Richard Carter dead in the eye. "Keep your money," I said, my voice ringing out clearly in the massive room. "You can't buy me, and you can't control her anymore. Your money is the only thing you have, and it makes you the poorest man I have ever met." Richard's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. The amusement vanished, replaced by pure, freezing wrath. He turned his attention back to Chloe. "If you walk out of that door with her," Richard said, his voice dropping to a deadly, quiet register, "you are no longer my daughter. I will freeze your accounts immediately. I will cancel your housing at the sorority. I will cut your tuition. You will have absolutely nothing. You will be a beggar in the street by sunset." Chloe stood frozen. The ultimate ultimatum. Everything she had ever known, every safety net, every luxury balanced on the edge of a knife. I held my breath, waiting. Chloe looked at her father. She looked at the checkbook on the table. And then, slowly, she reached into her designer purse. She pulled out her black Amex card. She pulled out the keys to her luxury SUV. She pulled out her university VIP housing pass. One by one, she dropped them onto the glass table. Plaque, plaque, plaque. "I already have nothing," Chloe whispered, tears sliding freely down her cheeks, but her voice was laced with a newfound, invincible strength. "You made sure of that a long time ago." She turned, grabbed my hand, and walked toward the door. "Chloe," her father roared, his composure finally breaking, the sound echoing violently off the glass walls. "If you walk out, do not ever come back." Chloe didn't hesitate. She didn't look back. She pulled open the heavy suite door, and we walked out, letting it slam shut behind us, cutting off his voice entirely. We rode the elevator down in complete silence. The adrenaline was pumping so hard through my veins I felt dizzy. When we finally stepped out onto the bustling city sidewalk, the cold air hit us like a physical blow. Chloe stopped walking. She looked down at her empty hands. The reality of what had just happened was crashing down on her. "Harper," she breathed, her voice shaking violently. "He did it. Cards are blocked. The car is gone." She looked up at me, pure panic setting in. "I don't even have a place to sleep tonight. I'm completely homeless." End of Part 7. Part 8. The bustling city sidewalk was a blur of noise and motion. Taxis honking, pedestrians rushing past with their heads buried in their phones, the biting wind sweeping discarded coffee cups into the gutter. But for me, the entire world had narrowed down to the terrified, trembling girl standing in front of me. Chloe stared at her empty hands like she had just severed her own limbs. The absolute reality of her choice was crashing down on her in real time. She didn't have her black Amex. She didn't have her keys. She didn't have the safety net that had dictated her entire existence since the day she was born. "Harper," she breathed, her voice cracking, her wide blue eyes welling with fresh tears. "I'm completely homeless. I don't have a bed. I don't have money for a cab. I don't even know how to get back to campus without my car. I didn't hesitate. I stepped forward, wrapping my arms tightly around her shoulders, pulling her against my chest right there on the crowded sidewalk. "Listen to me," I said fiercely, resting my chin against the top of her head. "You are not homeless. You are coming home with me. My dorm is small, and the radiator makes a terrifying clanking noise at 3 a.m., but you are safe. We are going to figure this out. I promise you, Chloe, we are going to figure this out." She buried her face in my coat, her shoulders shaking as she let out a muffled sob. Not a graceful, practiced cry, but a raw, agonizing release of 20 years of suffocating pressure. I held her tighter, ignoring the strange looks from passing businessmen, anchoring her to the ground until her breathing finally began to slow. "Come on," I whispered, gently pulling back and taking her hand. "We're taking the bus." The bus ride back to campus was a surreal experience. Chloe Carter, the former queen of Alpha Sigma, sat shivering on a plastic seat covered in questionable graffiti, wrapped in my oversized scarf. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her fingers intertwined tightly with mine. She didn't complain about the smell or the jolting ride. She just held on to me like a lifeline. When we finally pushed open the door to my dorm room, Liam and Stella were already there. They had clearly anticipated the worst. Liam had pushed my tiny desk into the corner to make room for a massive pile of blankets and pillows on the floor, constructing a makeshift fortress. Stella was sitting on my bed, her laptop open, surrounded by notepads and highlighters. The room smelled heavily of the massive stack of takeout pizza boxes Liam had ordered. "We tracked your location on Harper's phone," Liam announced, jumping up. He took one look at Chloe's pale, exhausted face and immediately abandoned his usual theatrics. He walked over, gently wrapping a thick fleece blanket around her shoulders. "I ordered extra cheese. And I bought an emergency pint of double fudge ice cream. You are safe in the bunker now, Chloe." Chloe looked at the blanket, then at the pizza, and then at Liam. "You bought me ice cream," she whispered, her voice completely broken. "Obviously," Liam said, guiding her to sit on the edge of the bed. "You just went to war with a billionaire. You need lactose and carbohydrates." Stella closed her laptop, her sharp eyes softening just a fraction as she looked at Chloe. "I reviewed the university's emergency housing protocols," Stella said calmly, handing Chloe a slice of pizza. "Since your father formally withdrew his financial support, you qualify for emergency independent student status. It requires a lot of paperwork, which I have already printed out and highlighted for you. But for tonight, you sleep here." Chloe stared at the two of them, the tears she had been fighting back on the bus finally spilling over again. For her entire life, her friendships had been transactional. She had been surrounded by people like Vanessa, people who only loved her when she was useful, when she was perfect, when she was funding the party. Now she was sitting in a cramped, messy dorm room with absolutely nothing to her name, and these two strangers were building her forts and researching legal loopholes to keep her safe. "Thank you," Chloe choked out, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. "You guys don't have to do this for me." "You're one of us now," Stella said simply, taking a bite of her pizza. "We protect our own." For the next 2 hours, the four of us sat on the floor, eating pizza and talking. For the first time since I had met her, Chloe actually looked relaxed. The heavy, invisible crown she had been carrying was gone. We laughed at Liam's terrible jokes, and Stella mapped out a budget using her intricate spreadsheets. But at 4 p.m., the fragile peace in the room was violently shattered by a sharp ding from Chloe's phone. Chloe picked it up, her face draining of color instantly. "What is it?" I asked, my anxiety flaring. "It's Vanessa," Chloe whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. She sent a text to the entire sorority group chat. "My dad formally withdrew my housing at the Delta Pi mansion. Vanessa told the house mother to box up all my belongings. She said if I don't come and collect my things by 6 p.m., they are dragging it all out to the dumpsters behind the dining hall." "That malicious bleach blonde demon," Liam hissed, slamming his pizza crust onto the paper plate. She can't do that. She is the vice president and my dad owns the mortgage on that house, Chloe said, her voice shaking as she stood up. She absolutely can do that. I have to go. My grandmother's jewelry is in that room. My passport. My cameras. I have to go get it before they destroy everything. You are not going alone, I said, standing up immediately and grabbing my coat. None of us are, Stella added, closing her laptop with a definitive snap. She stood up, her dark eyes flashing with a dangerous intensity. Liam grabbed the heavy-duty trash bags from the hall closet. We are going on a raid. The walk to sorority row felt like a march to the gallows. The Delta Pi mansion was a massive 3-story colonial house with towering white pillars and a perfectly manicured lawn. Normally, the front doors were thrown wide open, music blaring into the courtyard. Today, it felt like a fortress preparing for a siege. As we walked up the sweeping brick pathway, a group of girls sitting on the front porch immediately stopped talking, glaring at us with open hostility. Chloe stopped at the bottom of the steps. She looked up at the house she had practically ruled for 2 years, her hands balling into fists at her sides. I stepped up right beside her, lacing my fingers through hers. I've got you, I whispered. Chloe took a deep breath, squeezed my hand, and walked up the steps. When we pushed through the heavy front doors, the grand foyer was dead silent. Standing at the bottom of the sweeping mahogany staircase was Vanessa, flanked by 4 other executive board members. They were standing like a barricade. Their feet were 5 large cardboard boxes, hastily taped shut. Wow, Vanessa sneered, crossing her arms over her chest. Look who decided to show up. And you brought your little fan club. Move, Vanessa, Chloe said, her voice completely devoid of the warmth she used to fake for these girls. I'm going up to my room to pack my things. You don't have a room here anymore, Vanessa fired back, a cruel, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Your dad called. You're officially a liability. The executive board voted unanimously to revoke your letters. We already packed your stuff. Mostly just the cheap things. We figured since your dad paid for the designer bags and the laptops, they belong to the house now. My blood boiled. They were stealing from her. Chloe stepped forward, but Stella moved faster. Stella walked right up to Vanessa, stopping mere inches from her face. Stella was taller, and the absolute freezing calm in her eyes made Vanessa instinctively take a step back. Under state law, Stella said, her voice low and terrifyingly precise, a tenant must be given 30 days written notice before an eviction can be enforced, regardless of who pays the mortgage. Furthermore, withholding personal property, including electronics and valuables, constitutes grand larceny. I have the campus police captain's number on speed dial. Would you like me to invite him over to discuss the legal definition of theft, or are you going to move out of the way? Vanessa swallowed hard, her arrogant facade crumbling slightly under Stella's intense gaze. The girls behind her exchanged nervous glances. Take your garbage and get out, Vanessa muttered, stepping aside. Chloe didn't say another word. She walked past them, ascending the stairs to the master suite that used to be hers. We followed closely behind. Her room had been ransacked. Drawers were pulled open, clothes were thrown haphazardly onto the floor, and her mattress had been flipped. It was a petty, malicious display of revenge. Chloe stood in the doorway, taking it all in. But instead of crying, she just sighed. Help me find the lockbox under the bed, Chloe said, her voice steady. And my camera gear in the closet. Leave the clothes. Leave the designer bags. I don't want any of it. Are you sure? I asked, picking up a silk dress from the floor. I'm sure, Chloe said, pulling a small wooden box from beneath the overturned mattress. She clutched it to her chest, her grandmother's jewelry. Everything in this room was bought with his money to make me into someone I'm not. Let them keep it. I only want what's actually mine. We packed her personal documents, her sentimental items, and her cameras into the trash bags Liam had brought. We left thousands of dollars worth of clothes, shoes, and jewelry scattered on the floor. It was a shedding of skin. Complete rebirth. As we walked back out the front doors, carrying the bags, Vanessa was still standing in the foyer. "You're going to come crawling back, Chloe," Vanessa shouted as we walked down the brick pathway. "When you're broke and everyone forgets who you are, you'll regret this." Chloe didn't even turn around. She just kept walking, her hand firmly holding mine, leaving the mansion and that entire toxic life behind her forever. By the time we got back to the dorm and unpacked her few belongings, it was past midnight. Liam and Stella eventually hugged us both and went back to their own rooms, leaving Chloe and me alone in the quiet, dim light of my room. My dorm only had a narrow twin bed. We lay facing each other in the dark, pressed tightly together, the heavy blankets pulled up to our chins. The room was silent except for the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windowpane. Chloe reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. Her eyes were exhausted, but there was a profound peace in them that I had never seen before. "I'm terrified," she whispered into the space between us. "I don't know who I am without all of it." "You're Chloe," I whispered back, moving closer until our foreheads were touching. "You are brilliant and brave and beautiful, and you are going to figure out exactly who you want to be. And I am going to be right here with you while you do it." She smiled, a soft, genuine smile, and leaned in to kiss me. It was slow, tender, and deeply intimate, a silent promise in the dark that we had survived the worst of it. We fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the heavy weight of the day finally lifting. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Chloe gasping. I shot up in bed, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Chloe was sitting at my desk, bathed in the pale morning light, staring at the screen of her open laptop. Her hands were shaking violently over the keyboard. "Chloe? What's wrong?" I asked, my heart immediately beginning to race. She turned the laptop around slowly so I could see the screen. It was an email from the university bursar's office, marked with a bright red urgent flag. "Dear Chloe Carter, this is to inform you that the primary benefactor of your tuition account has initiated a full and immediate chargeback of all funds for the current academic year. Consequently, your student account shows an outstanding balance of $28,500. If this balance is not paid in full within 48 hours, you will be immediately disenrolled from the university, and your academic transcripts will be frozen." My blood ran cold. Her father hadn't just cut her off. He was actively destroying her future. And we had exactly 2 days to find $28,000, or Chloe was getting kicked out of the university forever. End of part 8. Chloe didn't even turn around. She just kept walking, her hand firmly holding mine, leaving the mansion and that entire toxic life behind her forever. By the time we got back to the dorm and unpacked her few belongings, it was past midnight. Liam and Stella eventually hugged us both and went back to their own rooms, leaving Chloe and me alone in the quiet, dim light of my room. My dorm only had a narrow twin bed. We lay facing each other in the dark, pressed tightly together, the heavy blankets pulled up to our chins. The room was silent except for the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windowpane. Chloe reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. Her eyes were exhausted, but there was a profound peace in them that I had never seen before. "I'm terrified," she whispered into the space between us. "I don't know who I am without all of it." "You're Chloe," I whispered back, moving closer until our foreheads were touching. "You are brilliant and brave and beautiful, and you are going to figure out exactly who you want to be. And I am going to be right here with you while you do it." She smiled, a soft, genuine smile, and leaned in to kiss me. It was slow, tender, and deeply intimate, a silent promise in the dark that we had survived the worst of it. We fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the heavy weight of the day finally lifting. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Chloe gasping. I shot up in bed, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Chloe was sitting at my desk, bathed in the pale morning light, staring at the screen of her open laptop. Her hands were shaking violently over the keyboard. "Chloe? What's wrong?" I asked, my heart immediately beginning to race. She turned the laptop around slowly so I could see the screen. It was an email from the university bursar's office, marked with a bright red urgent flag. Dear Chloe Carter, this is to inform you that the primary benefactor of your tuition account has initiated a full and immediate chargeback of all funds for the current academic year. Consequently, your student account shows an outstanding balance of $28,500. If this balance is not paid in full within 48 hours, you will be immediately disenrolled from the university, and your academic transcripts will be frozen. My blood ran cold. Her father hadn't just cut her off. He was actively destroying her future. And we had exactly 2 days to find $28,000, or Chloe was getting kicked out of the university forever. End of Part 8. Part 9. $28,500. I stared at the bright, glowing red numbers on Chloe's laptop screen until my eyes physically burned. The silence in my cramped dorm room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Chloe's shallow, panicked breathing. The email from the bursar's office felt like a physical death sentence. Her father hadn't just cut her off. He had orchestrated a calculated precision strike designed to leave her with absolutely no way out. He won, Chloe whispered, her voice completely hollow. She slumped back in my desk chair, her hands dropping limply into her lap. She looked like she had just gone 10 rounds in a heavyweight fight and finally hit the mat. He actually won. I have 48 hours before they freeze my transcripts and kick me out. I don't even have $20 to my name, Harper. I have nothing. No, I said firmly, snapping the laptop shut. The sharp clack made her jump. I knelt down in front of her, grabbing both of her trembling hands and forcing her to look at me. He did not win. We are not letting him win. We have 2 days. That is 48 hours to figure this out. Figure what out? She cried, her voice cracking as tears spilled over her lashes. Harper, it's almost $30,000. I can't get a loan without a cosigner. I can't get a job that pays that kind of money by tomorrow. He cornered me. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wants me to crawl back to the hotel and beg for my life back. You are never going back to him, I said fiercely, my heart aching at the sheer terror in her eyes. I will sell every single camera I own. I will sell my car. We will figure it out. Before Chloe could argue, the door to my dorm violently flew open. Liam marched in carrying a massive cardboard tray of coffees and a bag of bagels. Stella was right behind him, holding a thick stack of printed legal documents. Good morning, revolutionaries, Liam announced cheerfully, kicking the door shut. I brought carbs, caffeine, and enough emotional support too. He stopped dead in his tracks, taking in the scene. Chloe crying, me kneeling on the floor. He slowly set the coffees down on my dresser. Okay, the vibe in here is decidedly not victorious. What happened? I opened the laptop and turned it toward them. Stella's dark eyes scanned the screen. For the first time since I had met her, I saw a genuine flicker of shock cross her stoic features. Her jaw tightened, and she let out a slow, furious breath. A retroactive chargeback, Stella muttered, her voice dripping with venom. He claimed the tuition payments were unauthorized to force the university to demand the funds directly from her. That is completely ruthless. It's 28 grand. Liam shrieked, grabbing his hair. Stella, you're the numbers genius. How do we get 28 grand by tomorrow? Do we rob a bank? Because I don't have the upper body strength for a heist, but I will absolutely drive the getaway car. A bank heist is not a viable strategy, Liam, Stella said sharply, pacing the small room. She started tapping her chin, her brain clearly working in overdrive. Okay. Think. A GoFundMe? No, the funds wouldn't clear the bank in 48 hours. A private student loan? The approval process takes weeks. Stella stopped pacing and looked at Chloe. Chloe, you left the Delta Pi house yesterday. What exactly did you bring with you? Chloe wiped her eyes, looking confused. Just my clothes, my personal documents, and wait. She suddenly froze. Her eyes widened, and she scrambled off the chair, dropping to her knees next to my bed. She reached underneath the frame and pulled out the heavy, carved wooden lockbox she had salvaged from her ransacked sorority room. She placed the box on my desk, her hands trembling as she entered the combination code on the brass lock. Clicked open. We all crowded around the desk. Inside, resting on faded black velvet, was a breathtaking vintage jewelry collection. There was a heavy, intricate diamond collar necklace, a massive emerald cocktail ring surrounded by crushed diamonds, and a pair of pearl drop earrings that looked like they belonged in a museum. My grandmother left these to me when she passed away 5 years ago, Chloe whispered, her fingers hovering over the emerald ring. She put it in her will that they were to be given directly to me, not to my father. He tried to lock them in his safe, but I took them when I left for college. They are the only things I own that don't belong to him. Chloe, Liam breathed, his eyes wide as saucers. That is not mall jewelry. That is by an island jewelry. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked softly, resting my hand on her shoulder. This is your grandmother's legacy. It's your only connection to her. Once you sell it, it's gone. Chloe looked down at the diamonds, a single tear slipping off her chin and landing on the velvet. Then, she reached out and closed the lid of the box with a definitive, echoing snap. My grandmother hated what my father turned into, Chloe said, her voice steadying, a fierce, burning resolve replacing her tears. She used to tell me to never let a man put a price tag on my freedom. She would want me to use this to break out of his cage. She looked up at Stella. Where do we go? Stella pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. There's an elite estate jeweler downtown. They specialize in high-end vintage pieces and offer same-day cashier's checks. Get your coats. An hour later, we were standing in the hushed, velvet-lined showroom of a prestigious jewelry broker in the city's financial district. The air smelled like expensive polish and old money. The appraiser, an older man with a magnifying loupe permanently attached to his eye, sat behind a thick glass counter. He had been examining the pieces in total silence for 20 agonizing minutes. Chloe's hand was gripping mine so tightly I was losing circulation in my fingers, but I didn't care. I stood completely still, serving as her anchor. Liam and Stella were pacing near the front door, acting as lookouts. Finally, the appraiser lowered his loupe. He looked at Chloe, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. These are exceptional pieces, Miss Carter, he said, his voice quiet and respectful. Cut of the emerald is mid-century, completely flawless. And the diamond collar is a bespoke piece. You understand that if you consign them for auction, you could potentially get more in 6 months. I don't have 6 months, Chloe said firmly, not blinking. I need to liquidate them today. What is your offer? The appraiser typed a few numbers into a discreet calculator, turned it around, and slid it across the glass counter. My breath caught in my throat. 34,000. Chloe let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. It was enough. It was more than enough. It would cover the tuition debt entirely and leave her with enough money to survive the semester, buy meals, and stand completely on her own 2 feet. I'll take it, Chloe said, her voice ringing with absolute certainty. In a cashier's check made out to the university and the remainder in cash. When we walked out of the jewelry store 20 minutes later, Chloe was clutching a certified bank envelope to her chest like it was a shield. Transformation in her was staggering. She wasn't the terrified, trapped girl from the hotel penthouse anymore. She was a woman who had just bought her own life back. We have to hurry, Stella said, checking her watch. It's 4:15 p.m. The bursar's office closes at 5 p.m. If we don't hand them the check today, the automatic system will lock you out of your classes at midnight. We raced back to campus, sprinting across the courtyard in the biting wind. The administration building loomed ahead, its massive oak doors a symbol of everything that had tried to crush us in the last 2 days. We burst through the front doors, panting and out of breath, and marched straight toward the bursar's wing. But as we turned the corner into the main lobby, we froze. Standing directly at the bursar's front counter, leaning casually against the marble desk, was Brody. And standing right next to him, wearing her Delta Pi letters like a uniform, was Vanessa. They were talking to the clerk, and Brody was laughing at something the clerk had said. They were checking to see if Chloe had been expelled yet. Brody turned around, catching sight of us. His arrogant laughter died instantly. He looked Chloe up and down, taking in her messy hair, her borrowed coat, and the exhaustion on her face. A cruel, triumphant smirk spread across his face. "Wow," Brody sneered, his voice echoing in the quiet lobby. "If it isn't the runaway. What are you doing here, Chloe? Did you come to beg for an extension? Or are you just here to turn in your student ID before security escorts you off campus?" Vanessa laughed, crossing her arms. "I told you she'd crash and burn, Brody. She doesn't have a dime. Her dad literally texted the executive board this morning to tell us she was cut off. It's over, Chloe. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the fact that you threw your life away for a nobody." She glared at me with absolute venom. Chloe didn't flinch. She didn't shrink back. She didn't look at me for reassurance. She let go of my hand, stood up perfectly straight, and walked directly toward them. Brody and Vanessa's smug smiles faltered as she approached, the sheer, undeniable power radiating from her catching them off guard. "Move," Chloe commanded, her voice dropping to an icy, authoritative tone that brooked absolutely no argument. Brody instinctively stepped aside. Chloe stepped up to the marble counter. She opened the certified bank envelope, pulled out the cashier's check, and slapped it down onto the desk in front of the stunned clerk. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the lobby. "Account number 884 to 219, Chloe said loudly, making sure every single person in the room heard her. "My balance is $28,500. That check is for the exact amount. Process it. Now." Clerk scrambled, frantically typing into her computer. She took the check, scanned it, and stamped a massive red paid in full seal on a receipt. "The balance is cleared, Miss Carter," the clerk stammered, handing her the receipt. "Your transcripts are unfrozen. Your enrollment is secure." Chloe took the receipt. She turned around slowly, facing Brody and Vanessa. They looked completely paralyzed, staring at the receipt in her hand like it was a ghost. Their entire narrative, their absolute certainty that she would fail without them, had just been obliterated in front of their eyes. "You don't own me," Chloe said to Brody, her eyes blazing with triumphant fire. "And my father doesn't own me. I paid my own way. So the next time you decide to wait in a lobby to watch me fail, you should bring a chair. Because you're going to be waiting a very long time." She didn't wait for a response. She walked past them, grabbed my hand, and pulled me toward the exit. Liam let out a loud, mocking whistle at Brody, and Stella offered Vanessa a terrifying, completely patronizing smile before following us out. We burst through the oak doors and back out into the freezing courtyard, the adrenaline making us completely giddy. Chloe was laughing, a real, uninhibited, joyous sound that made my heart soar. We had done it. We had actually won. "You were incredible," I cheered, spinning her around and pulling her into a massive hug. "That was the most amazing thing I have ever seen. I feel like I can breathe." Chloe laughed, burying her face in my neck, holding me tight. "For the first time in my life, Harper, I can actually breathe." "Excuse me." The voice cut through the courtyard like a frozen blade, killing our laughter instantly. We broke apart, turning toward the pathway. Parked illegally on the brick pedestrian walkway was a sleek, black, bulletproof town car. The rear door was open. Standing in the biting wind, wearing a long cashmere overcoat, was Richard Carter. He wasn't looking at the university. He wasn't looking at Liam or Stella. He was staring directly at Chloe, his eyes burning with a terrifying, unhinged fury. And he wasn't alone. Standing right behind him, holding a thick leather briefcase, was a man in a sharp gray suit who looked distinctly like a corporate litigator. You think a pawn shop check makes you independent? Richard Carter said, his voice low, vibrating with absolute menace. You think you can just walk away from me? Get in the car, Chloe. Now. End of Part 9. Part 10. The wind sweeping through the courtyard seemed to die completely, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence. The euphoria of the bursar's office evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp spike of absolute terror. Richard Carter didn't look like a father. He looked like an executioner. Corporate litigator standing behind him was a clear, undeniable threat, a visual representation of the fact that this was no longer a family dispute, it was a war. I said, Richard repeated, his voice echoing menacingly across the brick pathway, "Get in the car, Chloe!" Chloe froze beside me, her fingers suddenly turning to ice in my hand. Her triumphant posture crumbled instantly. The conditioning of 20 years, the instinct to obey, to surrender to his absolute authority, warred violently against the fragile independence she had just fought so desperately to build. She took a tiny, involuntary step backward, her breath hitching in her throat. "Don't!" I whispered fiercely, stepping slightly in front of her, placing my body between her and her father. I tightened my grip on her hand, anchoring her to the ground. "Do not move, Chloe. You owe him nothing." Richard Carter's cold blue eyes locked onto me, his expression twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Miss Evans," he said, his tone dripping with venom, "I suggest you remove your hand from my daughter before I have my attorney file a restraining order for harassment, extortion, and undue influence. You have played your little game, and it ends right here. You are out of your depth." "She's an adult," I fired back, my heart hammering violently against my ribs, but my voice refusing to shake. "She paid her tuition. She is an independent student. You have absolutely no legal right to tell her what to do, and you cannot force her into that car." "Legal rights?" Richard scoffed, a dark, humorless laugh escaping him. He gestured to the litigator behind him. "My legal team can bury you in so much litigation you won't be able to afford a bus ticket out of this city, let alone finish your degree. I warned you in the hotel. I offered you a gracious exit. You chose defiance. Now you will face the consequences." He turned his gaze back to Chloe, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. "You think selling your grandmother's jewelry makes you free, Chloe?" he demanded, his voice cracking like a whip. "It makes you foolish. You have no housing. You have no credit. You have no future without me. Brody's father is pulling his funding from my new development project because you humiliated his son today. You are actively destroying our family's legacy for this." He waved a dismissive, degrading hand toward me. Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, a single tear slipping down her pale cheek. Her chest was heaving. He was striking every single vulnerability, using every ounce of guilt and fear he had spent her entire life instilling in her. "Chloe, look at me," I pleaded softly, turning to face her, ignoring her father completely. I reached up, gently wiping the tear from her cheek. "He's trying to scare you because he knows he lost his leverage. He can't buy you anymore. The money you paid today? That was yours. Your grandmother gave it to you so you wouldn't have to be afraid of him. You are free." "She is not free," Richard roared, losing his cold composure, his face turning an ugly shade of red. He took a menacing step toward us. "She is a Carter. She belongs to me." Before he could take another step, Stella moved. Stella didn't yell. She didn't look intimidated. She walked calmly forward, pulling a thick, folded document from the inside pocket of her coat, and stepped directly into Richard Carter's path. "Mr. Carter," Stella said, her voice dropping to a terrifying absolute zero. "My name is Stella Rossi. I am a pre-law student at this university, and I spent the last 3 hours at the courthouse downtown while my friends were at the jeweler." Richard stopped, glaring at Stella. "Get out of my way, you arrogant little—" "I strongly suggest you let me finish," Stella interrupted smoothly, unfurling the document. This is a temporary restraining order, signed by Judge Terrace of the Municipal Court, naming you, Richard Carter, as the respondent and Chloe Carter as the petitioner. Richard froze. The litigator behind him shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the document in Stella's hand. On what grounds? The litigator demanded sharply, stepping forward. There is no basis for an injunction. The grounds of financial abuse, emotional coercion, and the illegal seizure of personal assets, Stella replied without missing a beat, looking the lawyer dead in the eye. Including the attempted theft of a minor's trust, specifically the jewelry collection willed to Chloe, which Mr. Carter attempted to lock in his personal safe, and the unauthorized chargeback of university funds to force an eviction. It's all documented. I filed the emergency petition under the domestic coercion statute. Stella thrust the paper toward Richard. You are hereby ordered to remain 500 feet away from Chloe Carter, her residence, and her place of education. If you take one more step toward her, or if you attempt to force her into that vehicle, I will signal campus security, who are currently standing just inside the administration building doors, by the way, to arrest you for violating a court order in front of 50 student witnesses. I stared at Stella, completely awestruck. She hadn't just been pacing at the jewelry store, she had been finalizing a legal nuclear strike. Richard Carter looked at the restraining order, then at the campus security guards who had indeed stepped out onto the administration building steps, watching the altercation closely. The veins in his neck were bulging. He looked at his litigator, expecting a defense. Sir, the lawyer murmured quietly, adjusting his briefcase. If the order is signed, we cannot risk a public arrest. Not with the merger pending. It would be catastrophic for the board. Richard's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were stark white. He looked at Stella, then at me, and finally at his daughter. The realization that he had completely lost control, that his money and intimidation could no longer bend her to his will, settled over him like a suffocating blanket. You are making the biggest mistake of your life, Chloe, Richard said, his voice dropping to a hoarse, venomous whisper. You are dead to me. Don't ever ask me for anything again. I won't, Chloe said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. For the first time, she looked her father directly in the eyes and held his gaze. I finally have everything I need. Richard Carter sneered, turning on his heel. He got into the back of the black town car, slamming the door so hard the heavy vehicle shook. The litigator scrambled into the front seat, and the car sped off down the pedestrian pathway, tires screeching against the brick. We stood in the freezing courtyard, the silence stretching out around us, heavy and profound. Liam let out a breath that sounded like a deflating balloon and dramatically collapsed onto a nearby bench. Stella Rossi, he gasped, clutching his chest. I am terrified of you, and I also want you to be the godmother to my future children. Stella neatly folded the restraining order and slipped it back into her coat pocket, looking completely unbothered. I told you, Harper. We protect our own. I turned to Chloe. She was staring at the empty space where the town car had just been. Her chest was rising and falling in slow, deep breaths. The battle was over. The war was over. The absolute worst thing that could possibly happen had just happened, and the sky hadn't fallen. She was still standing. Chloe, I whispered softly, reaching out to touch her arm. She turned to look at me, and the expression on her face broke my heart and healed it all at once. The exhaustion was there, and the grief of losing her family was real, but beneath it all there was a fierce, radiant light. Cage was broken. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around my waist, and buried her face in my shoulder. She didn't cry. She just held on to me, her breathing syncing with mine, anchoring herself in the reality of what we had just fought for. Thank you, she whispered against my coat. You did it, I murmured, burying my face in her hair, smelling the faint trace of vanilla. You saved yourself. 3 months later. Campus was awash in the golden, fading light of a late October afternoon. The biting wind of that horrible week had softened into a crisp autumn breeze, sending bright orange and red leaves skittering across the courtyard. I was sitting on a blanket under a massive oak tree, adjusting the focal length on my camera. The university magazine had offered me a paid staff position after the Bro is Over scandal died down, and my scholarship was secured for the rest of my degree. Things were quiet. Things were remarkably normal. Brody had transferred to a different university 2 weeks after the disciplinary hearing, taking his bruised ego and his frat bro entourage with him. The Delta Pi sorority was currently under probation, and Vanessa was spending her semester trying to salvage whatever social standing she had left. "Are you taking pictures of a blurry tree again?" I lowered my camera, a massive smile automatically breaking across my face. Chloe was walking across the grass toward me, holding 2 steaming paper cups of coffee. She wasn't wearing designer labels or perfectly styled sorority clothes. She was wearing my oversized gray hoodie, vintage jeans, and a pair of beat-up sneakers. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she had a smudge of charcoal on her cheek from her new introductory art class. She had moved out of my tiny dorm room and was currently splitting a cheap, drafty off-campus apartment with Liam, working part-time at the campus library to pay for her groceries. She had less money, less status, and less security than she had ever had in her entire life. And she had never looked happier. "I am documenting the changing of the seasons," I defended, accepting the coffee she handed me as she dropped down onto the blanket beside me. "It's art. It's a squirrel hoarding a donut," Chloe teased, leaning over to look at the digital display on the back of my camera. She laughed, the bright, uninhibited sound that I had fallen entirely in love with. She shifted closer, resting her head on my shoulder, her fingers automatically finding mine and lacing them together. Casual, public intimacy of it still made my heart flutter, but it no longer felt dangerous. It just felt like home. "Stella said she reviewed your financial aid application for next semester," Chloe murmured, watching the students rushing across the quad. "She thinks I'll qualify for a full grant." "Stella is never wrong," I replied, kissing the top of her head. "You're going to be fine." "We're going to be fine," Chloe corrected softly, looking up at me. The blue in her eyes was bright, clear, and completely free of the shadows that used to haunt them. She shifted, reaching up to cup my jaw, her thumb brushing gently against my cheekbone, the exact same way she had touched me on that dark terrace months ago. Only this time there were no secrets. There were no hidden agendas. There was no Brody watching from the shadows, and there was no fear of who might see us. "I love you," she whispered, the words simple and absolute. I smiled, dropping my camera onto the blanket and wrapped my arms around her waist, pulling her flush against me in the golden afternoon light. "I love you too," I whispered back just before I leaned in to kiss her. And as the campus bustled around us, completely unaware of the battles we had fought to get here, I realized that the best love stories aren't the perfect, shiny ones plastered on social media. They are the messy, terrifying, complicated ones. The ones where you have to tear down your entire life just to find the person you were always meant to be. She had a perfect life, a perfect boyfriend, and a perfect future. But when no one was watching, she chose me. And when everyone was watching, she stayed. End of story. Wow, just wow. Can we all just take a massive, collective deep breath after that? 'Cause I don't know about you, but my heart is still racing. Welcome to the end of this beautiful, chaotic, and incredibly emotional journey. You are listening to your GL girlfriend, and honestly, I am so glad we got to experience this absolute roller coaster together. Let's just break down what we just witnessed, because the character development in this story? Absolutely top tier. We started with Chloe, this untouchable, seemingly perfect campus queen who was completely trapped in a golden cage. It is so easy to look at girls like that and think they have it all figured out, right? We just assume their lives are perfect. But the reality of her situation was actually terrifying. Her father was using her tuition and her housing as a literal weapon, and Brody was treating her like a trophy to boost his own ego. It was suffocating. And then we have Harper, our brave, introverted photographer who just wanted to stay invisible. But you know what I love most about Harper? When the storm actually hit, she didn't run away. She stood right between Chloe and a literal billionaire. She was ready to sell her own cameras and give up everything to save Chloe's future. That is the exact kind of green flag energy we absolutely love to see on this channel. But okay, wait, we need to talk about the real MVPs of this story for a second. Liam and Stella. Can we get a massive round of applause in the comments for Stella Rossi? When she pulled out that restraining order in the middle of the courtyard, I literally screamed at my screen. We all need a Stella in our lives to handle our legal battles, and a Liam to build us a blanket fort and feed us pizza when the world is ending. This story really hit deep for me because it's not just about romance. It's about the terrifying reality of choosing your own truth, even when it means losing everything you've ever known. Chloe gave up her luxury SUV, her black Amex, her elite sorority status, and her family's approval, just so she could finally breathe and be honest about who she loves. So I have to ask you guys, and I really want you to let me know down in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Chloe's shoes? Would you have had the courage to drop those keys on that glass table and walk out of that penthouse with absolutely nothing? Also, I need to know, what was the most satisfying moment for you? Was it Chloe dumping Brody in the dean's office and dropping that black binder of receipts? Or was it when she slammed that cashier's check on the bursar's desk right in front of Vanessa's face? Let me know your favorite scene down below. I will be reading and replying to as many of you as I can. If this story made you feel something, if it made you laugh, cry, or scream out loud, please smash that like button. It helps the channel so much. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out. You are officially part of the Your GL Girlfriend family now, and I have so many more spicy, dramatic, and beautiful GL stories coming your way very soon. Thank you so much for watching, for your amazing support, and for spending your time with me today. Remember to always be brave, choose your own truth, and love whoever you want to love. This is Your GL Girlfriend signing off. I'll see you in the next video, babes. Bye.